And let's get ready to RPG!
RPG! RPG! RPG! RPG! RPG!
Hello and good evening. Welcome to the Night's Last Call. My name is Derek Melinda, welcoming you to a first look stream where we are going to be diving into Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay 4th edition, which I never owned until about 2 hours ago when I bought the PDF. So other than the cover, I have not gone to the book. So yeah, lots of exciting stuff happening though. I do want to give a quick shout out, not sponsored, hashtag not sponsored, but the fine folks at Magpie Games are putting on a Kickstarter for a new Root book. So they are doing Ruins and I think that, well, the name of the Kickstarter I think is called Ruins and Rolls, but the name of the book is Ruins and Expeditions. And it's actually filling in an element of the game which I think is much needed. It's an element of the board game where these vagabonds go into these ancient ruins and recover precious, equipment and magical items. But the core gameplay loop, as expressed in the first two books, the Root Core book and then the Travelers and Outsiders book, a little sus. It doesn't really kind of go into that. So yeah, and it also brings in stuff from the Marauders expansion, which if you're a Root board game fan, means that you get the rats, you get the Lord of Hundreds, and you also get the Badgers, you get the Keepers in Iron. And of course, both in the board game, I think this is very thematically appropriate because in the board game, both the Keepers in Iron and the Lord of Hundreds both care about items the way that the Vagabond cares about items. So I think that sets up a kind of an interesting opposition to this idea of the Vagabond going into ruins and getting items. Anyways, I think it's pretty cool. And sorry, I tried to mute there and it was delayed. The fine folks at Magpie reached out to me and said, "Hey, you actually ran a game of Root on your stream. Would what can you give us a fun little blurb or whatever?" So I did, and it's on the Kickstarter page, and that's pretty cool of them. So that they want to use it. They even linked to our actual play, which again, I'm proud of the work that we did, but I'm a little embarrassed because we were trying out some new audio stuff with that actual play, and it only ran for 6 or 7 episodes. Maybe 8 if you include some of the session zeros, but the first episode and a half are pretty brutal in terms of the audio. We were trying shotgun mics and then we tried lav mics. It was a whole disaster. In the end, we just put people onto this. I will say, if again, maybe in some perfect world where I have a studio in my own house and I don't have to worry about the rent and all this other stuff. And maybe one day we'll try to set up a perfect audio system where people can, get mic'd. But I without having the gigantic thing in their way. But I will say this, exempting. Now, don't get me wrong. I think this sounds great. I think it's very good sound. But, even when you're at the table, let me just tell you, having 5 of these big, boom arm things sitting around the table does take up a lot of room. But I have been very impressed. I don't think the audio quality is as good, but I have been very impressed by these Audio-Technica BPHS1s. This is an actual dynamic mic. It uses an XLR connection, and has to be put into a preamp. So it's like, it is essentially a real microphone. And I've done some experiments with it, and I think it could actually get a fair amount of noise rejection. And and plus it's a built-in headset, and I want my guys wearing headsets anyways when we're around the table. So if we ever do a future studio setup stream, I might just stick everybody in this, at least for, playing games. If we're doing more of a podcast style, then I think it makes sense for us to be on, the good mics. So anyways, that's number 1. Number 2 thing that I want to kind of quickly shout out here is, look at this. This here, okay, this here is the events just for September. And by the way, it's only the 10th, right? So a lot of times these things don't get filled in until later in the month. These are the events that we have coming up. These are just the community run games from the Knights of Last Call patrons. You'll see a lot of them have the preface SB. That stands for Southern Beaches. That's our new Pathfinder 2nd Edition mega campaign, which just kicked off last week. So it's in week 2. But, you know, and sometimes these games don't get really scheduled until a week or 2 out. So I would expect by the end of the month, this whole thing will be filled up like we've seen the first 2 weeks. But you'll see there's so many different games in there, not just Pathfinder 2nd Edition, although there is a lot of Pathfinder 2nd Edition with the kickoff. And it warms my heart. It makes me feel so proud to be part of this community. I guess I'm the leader of this community, but I really feel more like I'm part of the community. So that's number 2. Number 1, maybe go check out the Kickstarter. Number 2, for Magpie, if you're interested in Root. Number 2, there's a lot of gaming going on here. You know, summer's over, kids are back in school. I feel like people have more time to play. So I'm patient. I'm hoping I look forward to it. Dr. Waits popping in. Dr. Waits, I appreciate it. Wanted to pop in and say thanks to the community for all the support. Dr. Waits, absolutely. Dr. Waits has been dealing with some GM struggles, and you know, not all of them entirely unfounded. Dr. Waits, I kind of was like, oh, fuck it, I don't give up. But I do think people gave you some good advice. It's tough though. It's tough. It's, you know, and I think Dr. Waits is honestly in what I think the real GM situation, the real toughest GM situation is when you're playing with a group of people who are your friends, you know, and or maybe have been your group for 15 or 20 years. The idea that you're just going to drop your group for a new group is not really something that you can do. And your group is set in their ways. They're playing the games that they've been playing for 15, 20 years. And then you go and have this incredible, cool new experience. Maybe you join a really awesome Patreon and get access to a really cool Discord community, and you get all these cool ideas about new games that you could run. And you go, yeah, guys, we should all run these. And your play group goes, not really. You know, that's a tough spot to be in. And you want to share your passion. You want to share your enjoyment for these games with the people that you love, the people that you love playing with. But they don't seem very interested. And it just, you know, highlights that even when RPGs are important to us, there are different levels to which they are important. For some people, it's a big deal. For some other people, it's like, this is a fun thing I do, but I don't want to, you know, learn a new sport. Like, I'll give you a good example. Okay. Well, maybe I'm pretty, you know, open to try new things. But, you know, I play racquetball once or twice a week. And, you know, if my buddy was like, hey, instead of playing racquetball, we should go, I don't know, you know, golf or something, or, go play some new sport. Let's go join a basketball league. I might be like, yeah, look, I like hanging out with you and I like playing games with you, but I'm here to play racquetball. Like, I don't necessarily want to just, you know, drop that out. Ben.
Ben tipped $70. Love Warhammer. Charbo's got the shaft.
So Ben basically guaranteeing that we are going to get a Chubos first look stream. Thank you, Ben, for that. That's very generous of you. So we had a poll for which first look we were going to do today, and Derek's choice won. But second place, very close behind second place, was Chubos Marvelous Wish Granting Engine, I think is the name of the RPG, which I know nothing about other than it sounds absolutely chaotic and crazy and nonsense in like kind of a Wander Home Ryutama type way, which obviously means it's probably not something I'm going to really enjoy. So naturally, my patrons were really excited to see me struggle bus through that. Plus, the only thing I know about this game is that Ben himself, the man who just tipped for this, basically said it was an incomprehensible mess, but then at the end, it all suddenly somehow made sense. That's all I know. That's all I know. It's also apparently like 500 pages long. So there's a lot of hurdles to cross, you know, a lot of hurdles to get over here before we can really approach this game. But thank you, Ben. Meba Man says, I've never heard of Chubos. Meba Man, listen, let me tell you something. I know a lot of RPGs. I go to a lot of conventions. I spend a lot of my time at those conventions looking at indie game booths and small press publishers. I had never heard of this game until again, that's why I said, I said earlier, I don't necessarily feel like I feel like I'm a part of this community, not like the leader of it, because I get exposed to things all the time. In fact, we're just talking about Root. We did an actual play. We're saying that it's a great game. Root was introduced to us by Ben. So, it goes like that. Pepper says Southern Beaches has been really fun so far. Pepper, I have been super blown away, super excited by the response from the community. Lots of different games, lots of different GMs. Obviously, the play group has been incredible in basis, and I definitely felt like there was definitely a pent up demand for it, and it has responded. I think we had 15 or 16 games in the first week. I think we're on pace right now to do something like 20 in the second week. So far, so good. Jackal says, I just dropped my group for KOLC. Well, see, now that's the player's move. That's thinking with your head right there. All right. So anyways, thank you, Ben. That was a brief aside about Chubos coming soon. We'll be doing Chubos. We'll probably do Chubos next week. Actually, on Tuesday. And then this Thursday, we're going to be doing another campaign setting dive. So tonight we are here to talk about Warhammer. Now, Derek, you said this is a first look. Let me be very clear about something. Okay, I've been playing Warhammer. Okay, for a very my green screen's on, which is not good for the orcs and goblins. But you know what? I got to give the orcs and goblins their the respect that they deserve. So let me turn off my filter here. There we go. I have been playing Warhammer for a very long time. So I have been playing in 5th edition. I've been playing in 6th edition. I've been playing in 7th edition. And I've been playing in 8th edition. And that's just orcs and goblins. We also have dwarves. Lots of dwarves. Wood elves. Oh, there we go. Dwarves. And tell me if that's not the most badass dwarf of all time. I absolutely love everything about that. And I've been playing dwarves and orcs and goblins and dwarves since kind of the beginning. But then I discovered my long and abiding love for the high elves. And also, again, I think this is just an incredible, amazing piece of art. I ended up buying way too much. I spent a lot of money on high elves. Let me just say that. And again, I've got plenty of beat up core rule books from 8th edition and 7th edition and 6th edition, going all the way back. So Warhammer has been a huge part of my life since I was about 12 years old. Technically, my first thing I ever owned was the 4th edition box set. That was High Elves versus Orcs and Goblins. I remember I was going to get into it with my uncle, and we never really did. I didn't really start playing Warhammer properly until like 5th edition. But even between that, we were playing things like Mordheim, and we played a little bit of War Master. So Warhammer is something with which I am very, 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 very familiar. It also should be noted that in the last, 10 years or so, pretty much the only video game I have played has been the Total War series, because I've always loved the Total War series, ever since like Total War Rome, which I think is still to this day one of the most incredible video games of all time. But the Total War Warhammer 1 and 2. I didn't play the 3. I will admit, I've been super busy with the channel, and I haven't had a chance to play the 3rd one. But Warhammer Total War was amazing. It was incredible. It was everything I loved. Now, again, this is all backstory, but, I personally died inside because, for many years, Warhammer 40K was outpacing Warhammer Fantasy, the board game. And 8th edition, which some people consider to be a convoluted mess, but I actually liked 8th edition. A lot of people say 6th edition was best, but whatever. We'll agree to disagree. Anyways, after 8th edition, they canceled Warhammer Fantasy and instead released an abomination called Age of Sigmar, which I absolutely abhor. Especially when the game first came out, it was like not treated seriously at all. It didn't have point values. There was like a stupid character that like got a bonus if your beard was longer than your opponent's beard. I'm not even kidding. Because it was just supposed to be like a har, 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 we're all here to have fun and goof around. And I know that they eventually added points values back into the game and they tried to balance things, but I didn't like the style of the game. I didn't like that it was a skirmish game. I wanted rank and flank. And I know, so I stepped away. I stepped away from that. And my buddy tried to get me to get into 40K, and he was really into it. But I just never gravitated to 40K too much. I tried to collect Ultramarines, and it just didn't work. So I kind of stopped playing fantasy miniature games. I tried to play a couple other fantasy miniature games. I tried to play Kings of War, which I actually really like the rule set for. And it's, I think, by Alessio Cavatore, which is one of the old designers from GW. But I couldn't get that group together to keep playing it. So anyways, it's been quite the sort of, journey. Now, recently, just this past year, I don't know if you can see it right there, those blue spines, not the red spines, but those blue spines back there are the new re-release, essentially, of Warhammer. It's called Warhammer The Old World, and it is deliberately going back to this kind of classic version of Warhammer. I was super excited. I bought a lot of it. I have touched none of it because I've been super busy, and I don't have a place to play anywhere, close to anywhere. I used to have a buddy who had a room in his house that was strictly dedicated to miniature wargaming. We had a massive table built, all sorts of terrain, all the, everything in the room was literally only for this singular purpose. We didn't even have to take the game down if we wanted to. We could leave and come back. So I don't have that anymore. Hell, at my house, I don't even have a table. So it's been kind of difficult to try to find a way to start playing miniatures games again. But I do love Warhammer. So what about Warhammer role-playing? Well, I grew up, Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay has been around for a very long time. And it was released in the 80s. And I always knew it was around. But it was always sort of, in my mind, sort of perceived as being sort of jokey and grimdark. So, dare I say it, mirth and mayhem. And that wasn't really a style that I really appreciated much in the 90s. And so I was never really, and also at the time, and again, this is only going off of what I know from first and second edition, it used a D100 system, and I thought that was like, abhorrent. And so I had no interest in playing it. I was like, where's the D20? Again, because I was, 14 or 15 years old. Anyways, so Warhammer kind of, petered out. And then Fantasy Flight Games bought everything, because that's what they do. And they released their third edition of Warhammer called Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay. This really cool Sigmarian meteor, the twin-tailed comet of Sigmar. And this game, of course, was immediately hated by pretty much everybody who was a Warhammer purist. And in fact, this game, Warhammer 3rd Edition, Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay 3rd Edition, is basically the D&D 4th Edition of the Warhammer line. Because this game basically completely threw away all the old system that, and this is like what Fantasy Flight Games does, right? They did the same thing with Legend of the Five Rings. Legend of the Five Rings 1st, 2nd, 3rd, and 4th edition all used the D10 system roll and keep. Well, Legend of the Five Rings 5th edition, which was the first edition published by Fantasy Flight Games, of course, used their own proprietary dice with these weird symbols on it. And guess what? Warhammer 3rd edition used a bunch of weird dice with symbols on it. And I got to be honest with you, it was too much. I mean, even for me, there was like, the game has all these cards and these board, it really did feel more like a board game, honestly. Now, don't get me wrong. I like a good gamist game. So I kind of enjoyed it, but the problem I had was that resolving the dice rolls took far too long, and you made too many of them. So it was kind of difficult because it would the game dragged on a lot. So that was it. I stepped away from Warhammer. Never really got a fantasy game off the ropes, and my interest in the game has faded slightly until recently when the Old World was released. Now, of course, a couple of years ago, as they are known to do, Cubicle 7 got the license to Warhammer. I don't know if Fantasy Flight sold it or how maybe it expired from Games Workshop. Games Workshop gave it back to Cubicle 7. And in a very D&D 5th edition like move, my understanding is they basically went like, you know, we're going back to the classics. Forget about that previous edition. That was some gamist nonsense. We're going back to what made, you know, Warhammer great. And that brings us to Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay 4th edition. And yeah, we're gonna go ahead and get into that. So I don't really know what to expect other than what I vaguely know from the first and second edition of the game, which is not much. I never actually played it. I don't actually own any of those. So yeah. So we're gonna go ahead and go ahead and get into this here. Let me get this thing squared up, looking nice and pretty. Okay. So, and just real quick, I want to quickly here see here. Torin confirms Chubo's marvelous wish granting engine is the Western version of Ryotama. It's fantastic. Okay. Steinwan says that is a dwarf's dwarf. Going back to that before. Yes. Is Bob here? Who's the runaway GM that's killing themselves for NR? Actually, I think it's a bunch of GMs who are killing themselves for NR. But no, Bob's been doing very little. It's basically being handled by our GM council. Yep. Warhammer, very expensive. There's no doubt. I spent many thousands of dollars on each of my armies, you know? Let's see here. People talk about Soulbound. Never played that one either. Just a warning, the actual rules start about 148 pages into the book, so we will skip some of this. But let me just start off by saying I love the art. I mean, you know, I love Warhammer art. You know, I think Warhammer 40K, to be fair, I think Warhammer 40K is good, but I do think Warhammer 40K is just a bit too much over the top. But this is everything I love about Warhammer art. We've got a troll slayer, a dwarf troll slayer here in the bottom, chopping through a Skaven who's just getting completely obliterated. You have a massive rat ogre, which I have a soft spot in my heart, as some of you may well remember from my times playing Mordheim. So it is an absolute just treasure to see this. I love the detail. You know, this is an action scene, and I appreciate it. And I really do like this. All right. So, role-playing games. And you know what? And again, the little details. Like, see, we really wanted to get into the rules of this, but I do want to just say this is a lovely layout. You know, it's got this stuff in the margins. You know, it's got, like, the bad moon, and it's got the red. You know, these are all orc and goblin symbology, by the way. And there's very faded stuff here in the corner. This really, really simple horizontal rules, very basic breakdown. It's just it's very readable. It's easy to see. It is 3 columns, but maybe it's just because that's the table of contents. Anyways, so we've got 20 or 5 pages or so about what the game is about. And then we have 20 pages on creating a character. And then we have from page 46 all the way to page 116 is information on classes and careers. Okay. And then we learn about skills and talents. And then we get into the rules of the game. Good to know. And lots of rules. And then we get information about the different religions, downtime, casting spells and magic, information, a whopping 6 pages for the game master. Okay, great. Oh, no, sorry, like 7 pages. And then information about Reichland, equipment, a bestiary, and some credits. All right. So let's first start by hopping over to the character sheet, because that's usually where I like to start with these things. So we've got our name, species, class, a career, which sounds like a class, but it's called a career, the level in that career, and then a career path. So maybe like a subclass within your core class. Age, height, hair, eyes, fine. Okay, so then we get to our characteristics, and these are classic Warhammer characteristics. Well, some of them are. WS stands for weapon skill, how good you are with melee weapons. BS is ballistic skill, how good you are with ranged weapons. Strength, toughness, initiative, and then we get into some Warhammer roleplay stats that I do not know what they are. Obviously, I can guess that this is agility, dex, and intellect or intelligence, but remains to be seen. WP, maybe willpower. FEL might be like fellowship. I don't know. We'll figure it out. So before we get too much further in this, I want to say my initial complete take is that I'm expecting this game to be very high S, very high with simulationist mechanics, very low N, although I'm already kind of seeing that there's something here called fate, which makes me think there's a little bit of meta currency. And probably like low to mid gamist. I'm feeling like this is going to predominantly feel and read like a simulationist game. All right, so then resilience, resolve, motivation. No clue what that actually is. Experience. Ooh, this is nice. Spent. I don't know if this exactly works, but spending experience is something I really like in games. Here's our basic skills. We've got, basically your standard trad 20 kind of type skills here. Athletics, intimidate, perception, ride. We got a box for group and advanced skills. So again, we're starting to see the crunch. We're starting to see the simulationism. I'm just saying. Here's a little bit of meta. I don't wonder if this has a game mechanic effect, but we can write down our short-term ambition and our long-term ambition. And quite frankly, I think that's just a great bit of advice. I think I've given that advice before, which is mostly taken from like Luke Crane games, which is like have a goal for, and when it says long-term, I don't think it should mean like the end of the campaign. I think that's too long-term. But it's like have a goal for the session, and then also have a goal for maybe like this adventure or this part of the campaign, because you should be able to accumulate wins as you go through the game. And I always think that's a really good idea. A box for party, a box for talents, which I'm assuming you're going to read out a lot like feats or powers. Oh, here comes the crunch, people. We've got armor points divided into your head, left arm, body, right leg, left leg, and a shield. Okay. We've got information about what psychology we're affecting. And again, psychology is a huge part of Warhammer. People running away from fearsome monsters, terrifying monsters. Wealth. We've got tracking coins, lots of things for encumbrance, a whole section for wounds, information about weapons, information about spells. All right, so they managed to fit it all onto 2 pages, but there's a lot going on here potentially. So we'll see this here. Maybe let's get into it. So let's start with the rules, because before we get into the character stuff, let's get into the rules. All right. Look at that art. So this is called a squig, by the way. And it is basically a crazed animal fungus hybrid. And the orcs and goblins, particularly the night goblins, are, they use them as everything from food to mounts to wild, crazy beasts. One of my favorite models of all time, it was from, I think, 7th edition Warhammer. There was a group called there was a monster or a thing that you could take called the Mangler Squig. And what a Mangler Squig was, it was 2 of these massive, big cave squigs that are just feral and crazy and just going crazy. And they surgically bind them together with a length of chain. And they just like set them loose on the battlefield. And they just whip around in complete randomness and just utterly obliterate everything that they touch. It's pretty sweet. All right. So we'll start here with the golden rule, which is if a rule negatively impacts fun for your group, change it or ignore it. Now, I will say that this is probably one of the better ways to phrase Rule 0 that I've seen. just because I like the way that it's saying if it's negatively impacting the fun of your group, then that's the reason why you might want to engage with that rule and change it. And I also like that they have this careful thing here. Be careful not to confuse fun with always succeeding. A sense of risk and the real possibility of failure is an important part of drama. Things going wrong provides players with the challenge of recovering from setbacks. So pretty cool stuff there. All right. Tests. All right. When your character takes an action, GM will let you know what happens. It's very wordy. It's very wordy. I'm not saying that's a bad thing. I'm just saying there's a lot of word. Lots of examples, though. That's usually a good thing. All right. Simple tests are used when you need to determine if your character succeeds or fails at a simple test. Does Molly leap the churning stream? Can Wilhelm charm a lower price from the truculent merchant? Take care, Blood Earnest. Often a quick yes or no answer to these questions allows your answer to progress swiftly. The exception to this is when a failure would significantly impact the progress of the adventure, in which case use a dramatic test instead. So, okay, remains to be seen here, but I think we're seeing a narrativist bend, because the idea basically is you have two different mechanics. I could be reading too much into this, but one sounds like a basic simulationist type mechanic, right? How good are you at a skill? How difficult is the skill? Can you succeed or not, right? Basic simulationism. But they also mention here, basically, if something would be really important, you might make a dramatic test instead. So that's interesting. All right. To perform a simple test, you roll D100, see throwing bones on page 6, and compare the results to the skill or characteristic best suited to the action. Okay. Note, this test may be modified by the GM if it is easy or hard. Okay. If you roll lower or equal, then your outcome is a success. If you roll higher, then it is a failure. Whatever the outcome of the test, after testing, the GM should describe what happens so everyone understands. So very basic, D100, equal to or under your skill. GM can modify it, which we'll see here on page 153. And I'm just going to shoot ahead here to 153 because I'm curious to see what we have here. So here we go. Difficulty table. So this is modified to your skill, I would assume. So if I have a 70 in ride and the GM says, okay, but this is a wild horse that you just jumped on and you're riding through a volcano, it's very hard. I'm going to give you a minus 30 to your modifier. So my 70 becomes a 40. So now I have to roll 40 or less. It's interesting that this is not, what's the word I'm looking for? It's asymmetrical. Look at this. Very easy is plus 60, but very hard is only minus 30. Hard is 20, 40, 10. So that it's doubled on the making it easier, and it's, normal or halved, arguably, on the very hard. That's an interesting way. This is the kind of design that I look at and I say, I don't think I would ever design a game like that, because not that I'm obsessed with like things being symmetrical, but it is interesting that they would decide to do this, and I wonder how that kind of rule comes to bear. All right, so pretty basic here. So that's a test. Seems pretty simple. Some talents can improve a test success or grant you access to unique tests, allowing you to attempt extraordinary feats. They cannot get away from using the word feats. Automatic success and failure, no matter how successful. Okay, so if you roll a nat 1, it's always a failure, and if you roll a nat 20, it's always a success. And of course, they don't have nat 1s and nat 20s on D100s, but we do. It's 100%, so you can just divide by 20, and you get a 5% range. So 5% chance of always succeeding, 5% chance of always failing. But here's the options. What about an auto success? Not everybody likes a 5% chance. So there's just a couple different rules. Von Mein Kampf's preeminent probability paraphernalia, which is a very Warhammerian type way thing to say something here. Just giving you some information on your math. So here we go. Resolving actions, little flow chart. An event or action with uncertain outcome takes place. Now notice, look at the difference here. If, it's interesting how it's like, is the outcome uncertain? It's like the first thing that you sort of, take into account. And it's an event or an action. It's interesting. Is success or failure going to be particularly important, exciting, or dramatic? Let's say yes. Do you need to find out how well the test succeeds or fails? Yes. Then we make a dramatic test. But what if failure is very important? It's exciting, but we don't really care. We just want to know if we pass or fail. Then we go to a simple test. All right, well, what about the other side here? All right, we have an uncertain outcome. It's not very important, dramatic, or exciting. So, the person's like, can I get a lower price on this, Hawkland long rifle? No. Does the decision about success or failure need to be made randomly? Yes, make a test. No. GM decides on success or failure based on characters' relevant abilities. Now, I wonder, and again, this is part of the official rules resolution of this. I wonder if they'll give us some detail on that. That's interesting. Let's see here. Here we have just a basic sort of, lines and veils information here. Nobody's fun should come at another's expense. Fantastic. Respect the GM. Contribute. Play the game. Good stuff. So let's talk about dramatic tests. Simply knowing if you pass or fail is not always enough. Sometimes it is useful to know how well you succeed or how badly you fail. This is especially the case when pitching your skills against another. Okay, so most opposed tests are dramatic tests, which is often the case for magic and combat. So when you want to know exactly how well or badly you have performed a test, we use a dramatic test. Another reason for choosing a dramatic test is when the progress of the adventure could depend on the test. So this is their way of saying, look, we get it. Sometimes you get to a point in the adventure where you're asking for a check, and realistically, if the group fails or somebody fails, the adventure is over, which arguably is bad design, but it happens, right? We've all been there. Dramatic tests provide outcomes rather than straight success or failures, which means that even if the test is failed, the adventure continues, albeit in a more challenging way than if you had achieved a success. So this is interesting. This is sort of two different ways of resolving tests. And, again, one of the things I always talk about Powered by the Apocalypse, one of the things I really enjoy about it is if we get to one of these moments where I say, this isn't a situation where I'm going to let the party really fail. If Bob's character goes to leap over a flaming pit and I ask him to defy danger and he rolls a 6-, I'm not going, I could make as hard of a move as I want. And it is within my purview to say you fall into the pit and you burn to death. However, that's one of those situations where, following my principles and agendas, I don't want his failure to mean nothing. I just want it to have lasting and important consequences, which, create more drama and create more tension. And so giving me that ability as the GM to decide after the test has failed. This is a little bit like this, but taking a sort of different approach of saying we have two different resolution systems. Technically, there's 3 different resolution systems, right? You make a dramatic test, you make a simple test, or the GM just decides. That's interesting. All right. So basically we get gradients of success or failure with dramatic tests. Success levels, which are shortened to SL, are used to describe the effectiveness of a test. To determine the SL of a test, subtract the tens number. Okay. Subtract the tens number of the rolled dice from the tens number of the characteristic or skill being tested, including any modifiers. The higher the SL, the better. Okay, so basically it's comparing the tens digit against what you rolled. We kind of ignore the ones digit, right? So the higher the skill level, the better the outcome. The lower, the worse things have gone. Marginal results, where you succeed or fail a test with +0 or -0, could be interpreted as succeeding or failing by a whisker with minimal consequences, good or bad. Or it could be inconclusive, giving you results to try again. So this is a really interesting way. But we'll give you this example here. Ikengard is careening across the muddy fields atop a stallion. Look, they went to a ride example. Desperately fleeing the lands of a disgruntled noble when a wall blocks his passage. He decides to push his mount to jump, and the GM calls for a dramatic ride horse test. Ikengard rolls 29, so on a D100, D10, D10. He rolls a 29 against his horse skill of 41. The tens number of that check, okay, the tens number of the skill being tested is 4, because that's a 41. And the tens number he rolled was 2, which means he succeeds with +2 success levels. and he clears the wall with space to spare. Buoyed by his success, Isengard twists around in his saddle and makes the sign of the twin-tailed comet at the horseman pursuing him. Deuces. Unfortunately, this means he's not paying attention to where he's going. Hopefully, these are just for example purposes, and this GM would never actually do this. The GM calls for a dramatic perception test, and Isengard's player rolls a 82, significantly higher than their perception skill of 39. The 10's number rolled was 8, and the 10's number of the skill was 3, so they have failed with -5 success levels. There's also an option for determining this fast. Determining your success level involves some simple mathematics, so calculating it can slow play during fraught scenes. Fortunately, there's a fast way to calculate success level for those looking to keep their games fast. If you pass a test, use the result of your 10's die as the skill, of the success level. So if you pass with a 36, you get +3. With this optional rule, the closer you roll to the tested skill, the better, rather than lower being better. But if a test fails, you calculate normal. So it's a little bit of a shortcut, but I don't think I would use that. But here we go. So, and look at this. Look at this outcome table. I mean, this is the type of stuff we talk about all the time in our narrative games, right? You get yes and, you get yes but, you get no but, you get no and. In fact, we recently just did a stream where we basically broke down these things. And of course, we've got like critical yes and critical no. But yeah, this is basically PBTA mechanics, right? Now the difference, of course, is that in this situation, it's not fully narrative, because in a PBTA game, our horse rider could fail, and then the GM could say, as part of their hard move, you still managed to do it. It just comes with a great cost, or there's a tough choice that you have to make, or some sort of unfortunate consequence. In this situation, if you roll low enough, if you roll, 2, 3, 4, 5 under, you don't do it, right? So, this isn't quite as freeing in terms of the utter narrative that you get from Powered by the Apocalypse, but this is an interesting thing to see here. And originally I was thinking, dramatic tests must be pretty rare. But if you're using them for most opposed tests, which probably means most combat tests, I imagine these are actually pretty common. It's very interesting here. Okay. And of course, options for criticals and fumbles. We introduce extra rules for criticals and fumbles in combat later. They can also be used to add drama for all tests. Hey, Ben Dry. Not happy to watch live this time, but super happy to see the system again. Hope you're feeling well and excited to watch the VOD. Bendril, thank you so much for that, Bendril. Here's the thing, Bendril. John Glenn had to walk so that Neil Armstrong could fly, right? So Derek of 10 years ago would have been very uninterested in this game. Maybe Derek of even a few years ago might have been uninterested in this game. But this Derek, the Derek you see before you, thanks to this community, has gone through games like Mithras and Versus D and Call of Cthulhu. And I have, started to appreciate some, and I've played Dragonbane and some of these roll under systems. And I've started to really come around and really appreciate some of the inherent simplicity and awesomeness of looking at my skill and going, my skill is 61. I have a 61% chance of success. That's really nice. Now, obviously, it can modify the difficulty, but even then, these difficulty modifiers are just straight percentages. If I say, this is average difficulty plus 20, then I'm giving you 20% points free. And you're like, okay, I'm 20%. Not 20% more likely, because that's not the way percentages work, but I'm 20 percentage points more likely to succeed. So I think it's very intuitive. I was 61%. Now I'm 81%. Wow. Okay, great. Cool. And I'm a big fan of that. I'm also a big fan of that because that interaction, the back and forth, is part of the thing I like about Blades in the Dark, but it's also part of the thing I like about Legend of the Five Rings. I like it when the GM says, look, we're going to make a dice roll here. Okay. We're going to use the game mechanics. We're going to make a simple test, or we're going to, whatever. But the way that you described your action, the steps in the fiction that you took to prepare your action, the fact that you're setting up an ambush, I'm going to say, we're still going to roll the dice, but I'm going to say that this is easy. Plus 40. As a player, that is, I think, one of the most satisfying things that can happen. I think it's way more satisfying in certain ways than the GM just saying, it automatically succeeds, you don't have to roll. I mean, that can be fun sometimes, but I think seeing the effects, and I call it role-playing. I know a lot of people don't think of that as role-playing, but, describing the way that I want to solve a particular problem or approach a different action is, for me, the kind of one of the core elements of role-playing, which is why I think my definition of role-playing varies greatly from other people's definition of role-playing. So yeah, I really like this. Sometimes you want to do something that is not covered by your skills. And in these rare cases, you can make a characteristic test. Okay, so skills are the normal, but sometimes you can just roll against your characteristics. Like just roll strength, just roll toughness. Also, I should note, my guess here is that because it's modifying the die roll, my guess is the assumption here is that the players will always know what it is. They'll know it's a hard check because they need to know what it's modifying them. And look at this. I love this. There are many instances where the GM has to determine them on the fly. Making judgments like this is one of the most common functions of the GM. I couldn't agree more with that. I believe the GM is there to make judgments. I don't want the GM to be a robot. I don't want the GM to just be a processor. But I also don't want the GM coming up with whatever they want to come up with, right? I want them making these kind of judgment calls. I love this. Okay. Opposed tests. Sometimes you match your capabilities directly against an opponent. The results with a special dramatic test called an opposed test. They are important to the combat rules, but are used in other situations as well. An opposed test is handled now, to be honest with you, opposed tests in these D100 roll under thing is, for me, oftentimes where I kind of go, ooh, I don't really like this. I remember this from Against the Dark Master, and I was not a huge fan. And my sense is that this is going to be very similar. Does anyone know, by the way, I don't know, in chat, does anyone know the lineage of, obviously Warhammer 4th edition is derived from 2nd edition predominantly, which is derived from 1st. Did it come out of, basic role playing? Did it come out of BRP? Like, is that what like the lineage is? All right. Opposed tests are handled just like any other dramatic test, but both parties make a test. The party with the highest SL wins the test. Okay, so because I remember in Against Dark Master, there was this whole thing about like who rolled, and it was like if you both rolled under, but what if one of you rolled under but rolled lower but rolled higher? I just remember feeling like there was a really complicated set of rules here. So basically, we both test and we both determine our SL, which we, they've sort of shortcut it by making it just, right, the die you rolled minus the skill, the tens digit minus the tens digit. And if they're tied, the party with the higher skill wins. All right. So that doesn't seem too bad. But I generally am not a fan of opposed test. I'll just say that. Because I don't like rolling dice. I would just rather just say, this is the difficulty modifier. But, I get that some games use it. And again, this is more simulationist, right? Like, well, how good at fighting are they? How good at fighting are you? How well did you roll? How well did you roll? And then we kind of compare. Derek hates opposed checks. Yes, that's true. That's fair. That's fair to say, Ben. I do hate opposed checks. I don't really even like rolling dice, but it is what it is. I will say, one of the things that I enjoyed about the board game Warhammer is that I didn't have to roll the dice. Instead, I would just say, okay, the difficulty of this check is 2 purple dice. So you're going to add these 2 purple dice into your dice pool, and they're going to produce bad outcomes. And I don't actually have to decide anything other than I don't have to roll any dice. I just go, oh, it's difficulty 2, put 2 purple dice in. And you're like, oh, no. Anyways. Matthew Parker, throw me a little support here. I do like rolling dice, but I'm still not a fan of opposed checks. That's fair enough. Whereas Beowulf, unsurprisingly, says opposed checks is one of the things I love in Pendragon. If you hate rolling dice, then you will love Chubos. I don't know if that means that there's no dice rolling or if there's a shitload of dice rolling. Trajan said diceless systems for the win. Let's go. So the whole dice thing is a bit controversial. All right. Like any other test, opposed tests could be easier or harder. So the GM may decide modifiers and required. In most cases, these modifiers are applied equally to both sides, but it's not always the case that the modifiers are applied different. Okay, this is easy for you, plus 40, but it's difficult for him, minus 20. I mean, you could see how, you know, we're sort of getting into the weeds here. Matthew says, what is the purpose of generating two random numbers? Exactly. Yes, it's just higher variance for the outcome purpose. Matthew, exactly correct. I digress. Yes, complexity, right? But it's variability disguised as complexity, Ben. But you know, let's be clear. But anyways, you know, you're like, okay, this is easy for him, but it's hard for you. He gets a plus 40, you get a minus 20 or minus 10. Make your rolls. He succeeded with 1. You succeeded with 2. You're the succeeders. You know, you're the final succeeder. All right. Extended tests. I'm one of those version 3 fans, lonely but ardent. Look, Leopold, it was literally the only Warhammer fantasy game I had. And to be clear, Leopold, this Genesis, okay, I never owned the Star Wars one, but Genesis with all these dice was way too much to me. But when Fantasy Flight Games really scaled this back and toned this back for their Legend of the Five Rings 5th edition game, which has 2 different dice, ring dice and skill dice, I absolutely love that. I don't hate the idea of the custom dice, actually. I actually kind of like them. I actually like them a lot. Actually, I like them a lot. And the main reason is because there's no math, right? You just look at the symbols of your dice. Anyways, I will say Genesis, though, has too many dice, right? You had the skill dice, the proficiency dice, the boon dice, the bane dice, the attribute dice. I don't even remember what the yellow one was. Proficiency dice. Black were the banes. Whites were fortunes or something. Purple was the difficulty. Actually, I'm doing a pretty good job remembering these. Green, I think, is when you were in like a defensive stance. That green shows up really well, by the way. That's nice. The red was for the aggressive stance. Beowulf, Genesis has less than Warhammer. Oh, well, that's good to know. But let me be clear here. Warhammer Fantasy 3rd Edition had like 7 or 8 different types of dice. Anyways, I did love Leopold. You just, I know you don't want to distract from 4th edition. I love the fatigue and stress. I will say that was really cool, and I liked that. It was very gamey, but I like games, so that makes sense. All right, let's talk about extended tests. Sometimes the adventure will call for a specific number of success levels to be achieved. Okay, so success levels can also be sort of like ticking a clock in Blades or in like Fabula Ultima. All right. They will call for a specific number of success levels to be achieved to fully succeed at a time-consuming or especially taxing task. Doing this requires a special dramatic test called an extended test. These are handled the same fashion as every other dramatic test, but the success levels scored from multiple rolls are added together to reach a specific target. If the total success level scored ever falls below 0, you can start again from scratch with your next roll. So you can actually you can untick clocks if you fail very badly. I kind of like that. That's kind of fun. And again, you know, these things with these extended tests is there has to be some sort of context, okay? There has to be a reason why we're rolling all these dice. There has to be something dramatic going on, because otherwise the biggest problem I have with extended tests is when they turn into roll the dice. Did you get enough? No. Then roll them again. Did you get enough this time? No. Then keep rolling. Did you get enough this time? No, actually I lost a couple. Okay. Roll again. Okay. You know, it can become very boring and pointless. See also locks in Pathfinder 2nd edition that require multiple checks to open. The worst thing in the entire system. I stand by that. All right. So they have to pick an unexpectedly complex lock. This will require 5 success levels with a challenging pick lock. And that she only has 3 rounds before the guard arrives. So yeah, a time limit. That's a good way to sort of make it make sense, right? Molly's pick lock skill is 58, so she has a good chance of managing it, but time isn't on her side. She starts with a 63. Terrible start. She made no progress. Cursing under her breath, she draws and rolls again, scoring an 11, which gives her 4 success levels. She feels tension in her picks as the lock almost springs, but she hears the guard approach. The GM explains the next test is the last one before the guard arrives, so Molly can either abandon her attempt and avoid the guard or make a desperate attempt to secure the last success level she needs. And again, see, this is interesting. You're making even just this little example of play. If it was just you have 3 rounds to get 5 success levels, that's still kind of boring. By setting the stakes in the 3rd round, all right, if you make this check, then the guard's going to be on you and we're going to be in fighting. Or you can abandon and you can try to go hide, but that has its own, pros and cons. So I really like that they're setting the stakes here. And a really nice piece of art. Molly risks the roll and scores a 42. That's +1 success level. Of course, our hero succeeded. Taking her total 5, it opens with a click, and she slips through just before the guard arrives. Some more optional rules. I'm not going to worry too much about optional rules because that'll just kind of overwhelm me. Let's see here. Ben says Genesis is bananas. Genesis normally has 3 good dice, 3 bad dice, but the symbols on all of them are the same. That is, the symbols on the good dice are the same, and the symbols on the bad dice are the same. All right, assistance. Another thing that frequently comes up in these games is how does helping work? Sometimes multiple characters can work together. With the GM's permission, a character can assist to someone else. When doing so, the character with the best chance to succeed rolls the dice. Each character assisting gives you a bonus of +10. All right, pretty simple. Characters can assist each other on most texts, but there are limits. To assist, you need require at least 1 advance in the skill being tested. So you have to be somewhat presumably trained in it. They normally must be adjacent. You must not assist on the test. You may not assist to resist poison, disease, feats, fear, hazards, or anything else. The GM is appropriate. You may not be assisted by more characters than you have in the appropriate characteristic bonus. I don't know what that rule means. Let's see here. It doesn't say, but it does say see page 33. All right. Well, without getting straight into combat, now we know how the basic rules work. I do kind of want to go back and I want to quickly skim through the first part of the book. I mean, again, there's information here about, the combat. There's information about moving. There's information about conditions. Again, condition list, ablaze, bleeding, blinded, broken, deafened, entangled, fatigue, poison, prone, stunned, surprised, unconscious, right? It starts to sound a lot like a, kind of trad simulationist game, right? With a lot of different conditions to cover a lot of different situations here. Then we have this thing about fate and resilience, which I wasn't quite sure about this, but I wonder if this works a lot like luck from Call of Cthulhu. Information about injury and corruption. So maybe we'll get back to this stuff, but I do want to shoot over to the start of the book. Again, just love the art. Classic. Got a little story here. And again, the art is just, love it. I just love it. Fantastic. And the real fun, like in-world props, like this, this is like a letter written to you, probably from like an Elector Count or something, or from the Reichland or something. From Colonel Reichardt Mathis Sievers of the Imperial Ostlanders, Wolfenburg 2nd Regiment of Foot, stationed in Kipfis, the Border Princes. Ooh, the Border Princes. All right. So, yeah, lots of cool stuff here and about the state of what's going on in the world. And then we get to make a character. All right, creating a character, we get our blank character sheet. In some sections, you can either choose an option or accept the results of a die rolled to make the choice for you. You receive bonus experience points for choosing to accept random. Gotta love it. So I mean, right off the bat here, that's That's definitely an old school, you know, sensibility, right? Where it's like, you know, choose or roll, and we'll give you a bonus if you roll. You can choose one of 5 species. You can be human, halfling, dwarf, high elf, or wood elf. Wood elf is surprising to me because wood elves aren't exactly what I would call the good guys in Warhammer, but I guess they're good enough. But you get 20 XP. Okay, to be fair, look how I love this so much. Look at these probabilities. Now I get it. You can pick whatever you want. But these probabilities are right, people. This is how you do a probability. Actually, we're actually doing something like that with Dragontide, sort of in reverse. We're making people randomly roll their race or their species or whatever it's called in Dragonbane. And then if they don't like that, they can switch to human. So like we're making them roll randomly first, but then they can default to human after the fact. You can't just pick whatever you want though. You have to roll or be a human. But you get to roll first, see what you would get. So if you really don't want to be a duck person and you roll duck, you can be a human instead. But that's it. Those are your choices. Anyways, 90% are humans. Gotta love it. That's the way it should be. Especially for a game that is taking place in the Empire, right? In the heart of right in the heart of Reichland, which is like, you know, the heart of the Empire. All right, humans, Reichlander. So I guess by default you're a Reichlander, but there's other types of humans. There's like, you know, the Middenheimers, the Marienburgers. There's humans from Bretonia, Estalia, Tilia, the Border Princes, Kislev. Do we get anything for being a human? Or is it just flavor? Interesting. All right, dwarves, halflings, optional, animosity, elves. Given the long memories of dwarves and their tendency to bear grudges, many harbor a deep resentment towards elves for their part in the War of Vengeance. As such, many dwarves have the animosity elves psychology trait. Given some Warhammer Fantasy roleplay parties contain both elves and dwarves, this may lead to unhelpful tensions. So you may prefer to ignore this talent between party members. I don't think I would. You know, you get the fun Gimli Legolas tension there. I'm right. There's our wood elves. All right, so then we choose a class and career. Okay, your class determines your general place in society. Your career describes your current job and determines your status, which also influences how much money you can earn. Simulationism. You can simply choose your class or career if you're a loser. Oh, it doesn't say that, but you can simply choose your class and career from the option below, write them down on your character sheet, and move on. Alternatively, if you're unsure which to choose, or you just want to randomly select for bonus XP, then roll D100 on the random career and class. If you don't like the results, they've got like a whole system here for just like tempting you to be random. Because they're like, look, roll randomly. All right, if you don't like it, you know, you get a couple more choices, but you don't get as much XP. If you take the first one, if you roll it straight up, okay, you get 50 XP. And look, it's different percentages by different races. Look at that. Like this makes total sense, right? The Wood Elves are a very non-urban society. They live in, you know, nomadic. They're like a nomadic people that live in the different woods. So it makes sense that they wouldn't have, you know, engineers and lawyers and nuns and physicians. They don't really worship the gods. They worship, like, you know, they're very druidic in nature. They wouldn't have rat catchers and stuff like that. So it makes sense that a wood elf would never be one of these things. Although I suppose you could just pick one if you wanted to, but again, it'd be weird. All right. If you roll once and you don't like it, then you get to roll 2 more times. So now you get 3 choices. Your first one that you originally rolled and 2 more. If you choose one of those, you get 25. Then choose your class or career, or keep re-rolling on the table until you get something like. There is no XP bonus for this. So basically, you should always just roll the first time, because what if you roll the thing that you wanted to be anyways? Then you get bonus plus 50. Or it's in the next 2 and you get bonus plus 25. Otherwise, then you just pick what you want to be. if you do it completely randomly, you almost have enough XP to change your career anyways. Okay, so career changes are a thing, right? We can have midlife crisis. And Leopold says, the genius of this game, what makes it unique, is the career system tied to the setting. All right. I think you just found the advantage of being human. You take the roles and likely get human, and then randomly take the first career, and you're up plus 70 XP. Yes, it is rewarding the randomness. To be clear, Ben, I debated doing this, but we didn't want to for Dragontide because of Dragonbane and it's mirth and mayhem. And Dragonbane obviously has very similar roots in this situation. And I kind of wanted to encourage people to randomly roll rather than, give them outs. But we didn't want to discourage people and someone ends up with a character class they don't care. But I love how they do this. All right. So a career belongs to a certain class. So we're a human. I got some D100s right here. Or I should say D percentages right here. All right, so I got a 59, which I'm pretty sure is a human. Yeah, I'm almost 99. We know it's a human, 59. All right, second one is 16. My character is an artisan. Womp, womp. All right, I got to be honest with you. If I'm playing Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay, I don't want to be an artisan, okay? So I'm going to roll 2 more times. I'm being a coward, and I'm skipping it. Okay, so let's go with another one here. I got 67, which is off the chart. Oh, it continues on the other page. Holy shit, there's a whole other page. All right. That's River Woman. And my other option is 84, which is a racketeer. Well, I guess out of those, I want my bonus experience points. So I'll probably take Racketeer, although I don't like being rogues, but being a river folk sounds weird. All right, anyways, we'll be a Racketeer, but that's what I get. And I get my plus 25 experience points. How would you have done? Would you have picked Artisan? All right, anyways, cool. And by the way, holy shit, there's a lot of choices on this thing. Look at all these different careers. Holy shit. All right. Class. Choose one of the 8 classes. So this is, academics. Are you a law-abiding town citizen? Are you a sort of a person who works in the noble courts? A peasant? Sort of a ranger in the sort of traditional Tolkien-esque, like more of a nomadic person who wanders from place to place. Riverfolk. People who work their way through Reichland and beyond. Riverfolk all begin with low status, but some have opportunities that can lead to a very comfortable life. And so there's an idea here that almost like again, it's not a heroic, it's a heroic game, but it's not a heroic game, right? Like, there's kind of an element here of like, that kind of grim, dark, you're just trying to get rich, get wealthy, get by, right? It's not as much of like, oh, I am the noble hero who is going to, save the world. You're like, I'm kind of here just to, escape the horrible drudgery of my, painful life. There we go. So very cool. Options. But I want to play a Wood Elf Flagellant. You may have a great idea for a character excluded by the rules because normally the species in question doesn't pursue such a career for cultural, religious, or philosophical reasons. That's totally fine. Just take your character concept to the GM, and if you agree to it, you're good to go. It would be very silly to be a Wood Elf Flagellant, by the way. A Flagellant is a crazy religious nut who is so caught up in worshiping the emperor that and the gods that they basically are like psycho. Ah, yes, heroic barbers. All right. Attributes. Determine each of your attributes by referring to the attribute table. And again, if we shoot over here to the character sheet, attributes look like, characteristics maybe, fate. So, all right. Right away. Attributes include how fast or strong you are, how much damage you can sustain, how well you cope with stressful situations. Ooh, I like that. Attributes include movement, 10 characteristics, wounds, fate, and resilience. Wait, that's not fair. You may notice that not all characters are created equal. An elf has significant characteristic advantages. For example, Don't be deceived by numbers alone. There are many aspects to character creation, and all species have advantages and disadvantages. That may be true, but at least I really love and respect the fact that they're like, look, elves are immortal god beings from Ulthuan, and you are just a peasant scum. So a human scum. So give it up. Elf's going to be cooler than you. Characteristics. Your 10 characteristics are used in tests to determine if you perform an action successfully. The human average for these attributes is 30. Those who are gifted will get 40, and only the most truly dedicated will ever achieve scores over 60. Of course, other species have their own strengths and weaknesses, so their averages can be different. When determining your characteristics, roll 2d10 for each of the 10 characteristics and make a note of the results. If you feel your character would be improved if you swapped around some of the dice rolls, move to the next deck. If you stick completely with what your random results were, add the die roll rolls to the modifier for each characteristic from the table and write them on your character sheet and gain plus 50 XP. So if you go straight down the line, you get plus 50 XP. 2. All right, you rolled your numbers. Now you can rearrange them. And if you do that, you kept the numbers, but you rearrange them, you get plus 25. If you're still not happy with the results, you can either roll again and swap the rolls around with no XP bonus, or you could ignore the dice completely and allocate 100 points across the 10 characteristics as you prefer, with a minimum of 4 and a maximum of 18 allocated to any single characteristic. I, by the way, will note that the average of 2d10 is, the average of 2d10 is 11. And that means you're rolling 10 times. So you're on average, you're going to generate 110 points of ability. And if you just choose this, you're only getting 100 points of ability. So kind of, I mean, obviously there's variance and you could roll badly, but you know, you're actually kind of disadvantaged to not choose. All right. So here we can see what people get. So, okay, we get to actually finally see what these are. Okay, let's see how we did. Weapon skill, ballistic skill, strength, toughness, initiative, agility, dexterity, intelligence, willpower, fellowship. Okay, we got it all right. Wounds, fate, resilience, extra points of movement. Okay, so we're only rolling for 10. Wounds is calculated by our, whatever that is. Humans start with 2 fate. All the other sort of non-human races start with 0. I love it. Can I just say that one of my favorite things, Earth Dawn does this. One day, Donnie, we will talk about Earth Dawn. One of the things that Earth Dawn does really, really well is that humans are like, they're like the plucky race. They're like the lucky race, right? Like not the halflings. And I really, really like that humans in a world are sort of, they're like the fated ones. There's a very Tolkien-esque sort of appeal to me on that respect, because, you know, obviously whereas I'm getting off on a tangent here, but obviously whereas Eru Ilúvatar, right, had the children, right, elves and humans, and then gave life to the dwarfs, which were created by Aule. The fact is that the humans in a weird were the favored. You know, you might say, oh, the elves are so much better than the humans. They are, but the humans were like the favored race of Eru Ilúvatar. And like, that's like, I always think that's like really, really a cool way to do it. So I love that the humans start with fate points. I don't know what they do yet. I'm assuming there's some sort of narrative meta currency, re-roll hero point type mechanic, but we'll see. Resilience. Dwarves and halflings get it. Elves don't. Nice. Resilience 1. I don't know what extra points means. And movement. And the elves have really high movement. And by the way, I am particularly pleased by this because in Warhammer, classic Warhammer, movement, the movement skill, was how many inches that unit could move. And the standard for most races, most characters, was 4, including humans. And dwarves could only move 3 inches. And you guessed it, elves could move 5 inches. So that's like a nice little like tip of the hat to somebody like me. And it's also good resonance because, you know, if I read this book and we were going through it and someone's like, oh, it's a dwarf, what's their movement? I would probably go, I don't know, 3, because that's what it is in the game. So like it's nice to be able to be like, you know, just pulling that out. All right, so let's take a look at what we roll. So humans are straight down the line, 2d10 plus 20. So on average, humans are going to end up with like 30s, right? Plus or minus, you know, 31 plus or minus 5. Dwarves get 30 bonus points to weapon skill, 30 bonus points to toughness. They get less agility. They get less fellowship. They get more willpower. Love it. Halflings, obviously not as skilled with their weapons, more skilled with their ranged, less strength, a little bit more dexterity, a little bit more willpower, a little bit more fellowship, all very halfling-like. And then the elves are just uber broken. The only thing that they don't get is toughness. I'm actually surprised that this toughness isn't 2d10 plus 10. Elves are notoriously frail in the game. Although I suppose, actually, now that I think about it, the default toughness in Warhammer, the default toughness is 3 in Warhammer, the miniature game, and elves toughness is 3. The only distinction is that, like, even as you get into like elf heroes and elf lords, which presumably your character would be, their toughness isn't usually higher, whereas other races have higher toughnesses. But anyways, I don't hate this. Super high initiative, right in line with the game. High weapon skill, high ballistic skill, high agility, high dexterity, high intelligence, high willpower. Yes, 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 yes. Okay. Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay used to be compatible with Fantasy Battles. That's sick. That's sick. Dwarves get extra dexterity but less agility. Okay, so making a distinction between basically probably, right, like agile as in like a parkour, which obviously dwarves should be bad at, and dexterity as in like, you know, how good are you with your hands? And to that end, dwarves are noted craftspeople. So I would assume that that would, you know, and they're pretty good with their, you know, guns and their ranged weapons. So I assume that that's where that kind of comes into play. All right, ballistic skill, weapon skill, strength, toughness, initiative. All right, agility, physical coordination, natural athleticism, running, riding, hiding, and dodging. Okay, that makes sense. Dexterity, fine, delicate manual tasks like skilled manufacturing, musical instrument. It will also do things like pickpockets. Intelligence is thought, analysis, understanding, also useful for spells. Willpower, the general strength of your mind and the ability to shrug off difficulty and plow on with the job at hand. Fellowship, kind of your charisma. So, you know, we basically get a strength, a con. Dexterity is divided into agility and dexterity, and then we get intelligence, wisdom, and charisma, basically. And I don't hate it because dexterity is usually too good of a stat in D20. All right, characteristic bonus. Okay, the first or tens digit of a characteristic is known as its bonus value. Characteristic bonuses are used in a variety of different ways throughout the rules, especially for limiting what talents and defining spells. So a strength of 39 is a strength bonus of 3. 51 would be a 5. Does the character sheet show that? It does not. So, like, what would you write here? Would you write 34? Or do you not write? Or would I write 3? Like, if I had a 34 weapon skill, would I write 34 or would I write 3? I don't know that that was very clear to me. You would write 34. Okay. Said photo bunnies. All right. The other thing is wounds. Okay. Unlike other attributes, wounds are derived from your strength bonus, twice your toughness bonus, and your willpower bonus. Yes. What a cool way to generate hit points. I love that equation. I absolutely love that equation. It's very simulationist, of course. But like, I love the idea that, you know, your toughness matters the most, you know, but how strong you are matters and how resilient you are, because wounds isn't necessarily just how much meat you have on your bones. It's also your ability to keep going when you take those wounds. I'll notice, by the way, that halflings don't even get to add their strength bonus. Brutal. Cool. Very cool. Note, halflings have the small talent and automatically start with fewer wounds. All right. All right. So here are the other stats I didn't know. Fate and fortune, resilience, and resolve. And just to remind ourselves here, going back to our character sheet, we've got this section here for fate, which has 2 boxes, fate and fortune. And then we have resilience, resolve, and motivation. It's a little weird that this box is titled resilience, and then there's a thing called resilience. And then this box is titled fate, and there's a thing called fate. But we'll get into that. And by the way, let me be very clear about something too. I am trying not to let my fanboyism of Warhammer, cloud my judgment here. But I do like Warhammer a lot. The miniature game and the world and all that stuff. All right. Your fate represents your destiny and is directly tied to your fortune, a measure of your luck. Okay. Your resilience is your inner strength, which is directly related to your resolve, defining your grit. Your resilience also comes with a motivation, which is a single word or phrase describing what drives your character forward. See page 170 for more on all of these. Okay, so we'll have to get into the rules section again once we kind of figure out what these do. But you start with a base value for fate and resilience and then have a number of extra points, okay, to spread between these two attributes as you see fit. The numbers for these are shown in the attributes tables. The more points you allocate to fate, the luckier you are. By comparison, a higher resilience shows that you can steal through any situation. So let's go back up to that table. Okay, so humans and halflings get the most extra points. So, wow, okay, so, an elf has no fate and no resilience. And that just sounds so cool that, like, elves have no fate. I love it. And they have limited resilience. Dwarves have good resilience, as do halflings. Humans have some, but humans have 3 points of extra points. So you could be a 5 fate. You could be a 5 fate human. That's awesome. I don't know what fate does, but it sounds cool. Whereas, like, an elf is going to be like 1-1 or 2-0. Those are your only options. Or 0-2, I suppose. And, I like that a dwarf could put all points into resilience, and then they still have 4 resilience, which is, the humans can't beat that. They can tie it. But the halflings can. The halflings can go up to 5 resilience. That's awesome. Anyways, it feels thematic. It feels appropriate. And boy, God, does it make it feel like, does it actually make the species that you choose feel different? I bet it does. I bet it does. I bet one of the coolest things, one of the easy, and this can happen. I'm not saying it does. I'm not saying it never happens in D&D or, Pathfinder. But one of the coolest things that can happen is when something, and this used to happen, I will admit, in 4th edition a lot. Because in 4th edition, the different races were really different with very, very powerful different racial powers, some of which were really insane. Like, the Eladrin, which was like the magical elf people, they could like teleport from the very beginning of the game. And one of the coolest ways that I know that like a race system is working is where you really like your character and you really like your species. You really like your race that you chose. But sometimes other people at the table do something and you go, damn, it'd be sweet to be a dwarf, or you go, oh, man, it'd be awesome to be an elf, or like, or like somebody rolls, like the elf has no fate and they're like, whew, boy, I'm glad I'm a human, right? Like having those moments where you feel different, I think is such a huge, important step. All right. Okay, so that's our fate score. That's our resilience score. Your initial fortune is equal to your fate. Your initial resolve equals your resilience. Okay, so fortune and fate. So fate is determined by fortune. So fate is maybe more spendable or something. All characters choose a motivation. It represents your character's core essence, a word or phrase that sums up what you live for. In addition to the obvious role-playing benefits for portraying your character, motivation is used to help you regain resolve points. When considering your motivation, think of something that is fundamental to your character's nature. Also make it something fun to roleplay and something that will work well with the other players. Okay, cool. So, it's like Drive from the Root RPG, right? Or like, a lot of different games, but, Belief, or a Goal from Torchbearer, from Burning Wheel. But the idea that we're gonna write this down. So it's like my motivation is, to protect the weak as the Reiksguard Knight. And so whenever I stand up to bullies and braggarts, whenever I risk my life and limb to save the citizenry of Reikrun, then I can regain resolve. So I like it. So if you're an elf with 0 resolve, then your motivation doesn't matter. And somehow that also feels appropriate. Man. Again, the understanding the elves, like how they work is it actually, that almost makes sense. Let's see here. All right. Movement is determined how far you walk and run. So double your movement's 4. You double it for. If using a grid for movement, this indicates how many squares you can move in a round or inches across the tabletop. Oh, I would totally play Warhammer with just inches. Over the longer term, it indicates how many miles per hour you can move. Okay, pretty basic stuff there. And then we turn to our career once we pick a career, and we look to the advanced scheme and find the 3 characteristics marked with a cross without a brass, silver, or gold background. You can allocate a total of 5 advances across these characteristics as you choose. Okay, so basically, once we pick a once we pick a class and career, then we get some extra points that we can increase our characteristics in, because they're kind of like, that career is naturally aligned with those type of characteristics. Okay, that makes sense. What is a characteristic advance? Here's a characteristic advance. It shows how much training or experience you have. The number of advances you have in the characteristic is added to the initial characteristic to show your current ability. So if your initial dexterity is 25 and you have 5 dex advances, your dexterity is now 30. My God, is that? So, okay. Oh, perfect. Okay. Our initial goes here. The number of advances go here, and the current. I wonder if there's a reason for keeping track of the initial versus the advances. Is it just for like fun? So you can see how far you've come. But okay, so a little bit of a worksheet here, but at least it's on the sheet. So, well, there's a level. I was going to say, so is this not a level up system? Because you're spending experience points and you're gaining these advances. And I could see where it also says that, like skills kind of feel like they work the same way, right? Your base chance is based off of your characteristic, and then you have a certain number of advances. I don't know what this skill box is for yet, but all right. Then we choose our skills and talents. When you learn a skill, note down the number of advances you gain in the advances boxes of the skill. If you should learn this skill again, add the extra advances to the old total to create a new number of advances. If you learn okay, I see what it's saying. Okay, so if my dex is 40 and I have 10 advances, then my skill is 50. Okay, I'm an idiot. Okay. Skills are classified as either basic or advanced. Basic represent common abilities that everybody can afford. You can use these skills. Oh, remember it said in order to help someone, you have to have an advance in it. That's what it meant, right? So you have to basically put skill ranks into the skill ranks. Or you have to put skill ranks in the skill. And if something's basic, anybody could do it. You don't need any skill in it. But advanced skills require specialist knowledge, and you have to have at least taken 1 advance in them. Some talents can be taken multiple times. If you have an opportunity to take a second time, check the talent entry to see if it can be learned multiple times and mark it many times. Each species has a variety of skills and talents to choose from. You may choose 3 skills to gain 5 advances each, and 3 skills to gain 3 advances each. If a talent listing presents a choice, you select 1 talent from the choices given. Any random talents are determined by the random talent table. If you roll a talent you already have, you may re-roll. Okay, so basically, is there a reason we would roll, or is it just... Oh, okay, I see what it is. So humans these are, for people from the Reichland, these are just stuff that they tend to be able to do, right? They are, as a species, as a people, they are good at animal care. They know the lore of their land. They're good with a bow. They're good with basic weaponry. Whereas a dwarf is good at consuming alcohol and staying cool and enduring. And they know Kazalid, which is the language of the dwarves. They know about geology, metallurgy, tradesmanship. Okay. And we also get talents. So we can have doomed, savvy, or suave. 3 random talents. 3 skills. Draw a talent you already have. How many talents do we get? I'm kind of confused here. Hold on a second. If a talent listing presents a choice, you select 1 talent from the choices given. Oh, okay. So I'm assuming we can... So we can either choose doomed and savvy, or we can choose suave and 3 random talents. Is that how this is phrased? This. We either get doomed and savvy, or we get. Oh, okay. So we're all doomed. Well, then we have to pick savvy or suave, and then we get 3 random talents. All dwarves have magic resistance. All dwarves have night vision. Dwarves can either choose to read and write or be relentless. They can choose to be resolute or strong-minded, and then they get sturdy. No randomness there. Elves, high elves specifically, all have acute sense of sight. They're all cool-headed. Oh, they could be cool-headed or savvy. They all have night vision. They get second sight or sixth sense, and they can all read and write. Okay. Yeah, it's a little unintuitive, but kind of break it down there. And I'm sure it describes it here when you get this thing here. So anyway, random talents here, just a bunch of different stuff. No idea what these do, of course, but so then we would turn to our character and we start picking skills and all this other stuff. We don't know about this here, but we allocate 40 advances. There are 8 skills and 4 talents at that level. We allocate 40 advances to our 8 starting skills with no more than 10 to any single stage. This is enough for you to add 5 advances to every career skill if you want, which is one of the required steps to complete your career if you wish to move on to a new one. See changing career. Okay. Trappings is what you start with. Okay, yep. All right. You're starting equipment. And that depends on, so our what was he, a ruffian, a racketeer? He would start with clothing, dagger, pouch, sling bag with 2 candles, D10 matches, a hood or mask. So clearly, like if we look here, the only people that start, an academic starts with a dagger. Everybody seems to start with a dagger. And the warrior starts with a hand weapon. Gotta love it. This is some old school grimy shit. An ear pick or a comb. All right. Next, find your status, which is listed by your career name. It will be either marked with brass, silver, or gold, which is your status tier, followed by a number, which is your standing. Your status tier and standing determine your initial wealth. Okay, so if we're gold, we get a gold crown per status level. If we're brass, we get 2d10 brass pennies. If we're silver, we get d10 per status level. And then we add our detail, and then we add our names. With a lot of information about how to properly name dwarves and elves. An elf name generator. Awesome. All right. Random age. Love it. And I love it. There's, 60 for average lifespan, 60 for a human, 120 for halfling, over 200 for dwarves, and elves don't appear to age at all and have been known to live for thousands of years or more. Love it. Random height, of course. If you want truly random height, here's truly. Random eye color. My buddy George would love this game. This is everything that he could ever want. All right, so then we choose our ambitions. Your GM has the final say, but we should choose ambitions between sessions. Short term are immediate goals, achievable within days or weeks, possibly sooner. A short-term ambition should take 2 to 3 sessions to complete. Perfect. Long-term ambitions might take months or years and may never be achieved at all. They are more like your primary motivation. Okay, so that is, in this game, that is like, what is it that you want to really do, Like if you think about Bob's character, Azius from the Rise of the Rune Lords campaign, right? His goal as an adventurer, his long-term ambition, he wanted to own it, he wanted to reopen his bar and retire and be a barkeep. If you want to keep your ambitions secret from other players, then you may be able to do so. All right. If you achieve your short-term ambition, you receive a bonus plus 50 XP and choose a new short-term. If you achieve your long-term ambition, you may either receive a bonus of plus 500 XP or retire your character, who becomes an NPC under your GM's control, but you gain it's a bribe. I love this. And you gain a bonus of half of your earned XP of your current character to spend on your next character. Retired characters will generally stay in place to take advantage of their chief ambition. I love this. You don't have to retire. You could choose a new long-term ambition, But I bet for a lot of people, after you've been playing for that long and you achieve your long-term ambition, you go, you know what? My character got their happy ending. I want them to retire. And you know what? I get to make a new character, which is pretty cool. And I get to start with like a windfall of XP. That sounds cool to me. I love it. You have a party thing here too. How does your party work? How do they party know to each other? Party ambitions. So just like we have individual ambitions, we have party ambitions. Short-term have the same scope as personal. They should never be the same, but there's no reason that they can't complement each other. Long-term party ambitions work like long-term personal ambition. It can be wide in scope, but are for the entire group. If your party achieves its short-term ambition, you get plus 50, or you get plus 500. And if the group achieves its long-term, all players receive 500, and the party chooses a new long-term one. But as many players as wish to do so can retire their characters, who all become NPCs under the GM's control, and they gain a bonus of half their experience points to the next thing. That's awesome. I kind of love that. And then we got, questions. Game of 20 questions from Legend of the Five Rings. What's your family like? What's your childhood like? It's funny how these like grim, dark, simulationist games, in my personal opinion, have sometimes, more emphasis on like character building and like not just like the stats, but like, why is your character adventuring? Why'd you leave home? What are your religion? Like asking these real pertinent questions as part of the character creation process. It's interesting. Why are you adventuring? That's a great question. When you are creating your character story, you might feel that you should have a powerful emotion such as love, camaraderie, or hatred towards certain family members, situations, enemies, or other features of life. If the GM agrees, you can take that psychology trait. Love it. It could probably help you or hurt you depending on how it goes. But before you start playing, did you gain any bonus XP during character crashes? If so, you may wish to spend it. All right. Advancement. So this is what we get to do with our XP. And we might have XP from the character creation process itself. Or maybe we just retired our character and we're starting with like a big windfall of hundreds of XP. Experience points will be used to improve your character. The GM will give you XP after every session of play, and you may be rewarded for doing particularly well. This could include successfully resolving the adventure, role-playing your character well, or defeating important enemies. All sound reasonable to me. Between sessions, you can spend your XP to buy new skills and talents, increase your characteristics, and to change your career. The final step in creating your character is to spend any bonus XP that you've earned. Initially, you can only spend your XP to increase the 3 characteristics, 8 skills, and 4 talents available to your career level. Okay. So initially, we can only advance 3 of our characteristics, 8 of our skills, 4 of our talents, depending on our career level. But there's okay. So it costs more as you put more advance. Holy shit balls. So it's 10 XP to get the first 5 advances per advance. But then it progresses and it goes up to 15 to 20. Now, to be fair, Forbidden Lands does this, right? Forbidden Lands, the first rank of a skill is 5, the second is 10, the third is 15. And characteristics also go up by 5, but then they start going up. Oh, some of these eventually start going up by 10, and then they go up by 20s, and then they go up by 30s, and then they goes up by 40s. So that's obviously insanity. So like realistically, right, you're never going to get much more than like, I don't know, this many advances, I would guess. I don't even know why is this on the table? Additionally, talent is 100 XP or plus an additional 100 XP for each time the talent has been taken. To leave a completed career costs 100 XP. To leave an incompleted career costs 200 XP. Interesting. Finish. Your character is now done and you are ready to play. All right. Hey, look, it's a character sheet summary. That's cool. Ben says, I am not a fan of these types of systems. Which type of systems, Ben? The skill using XP to gain advancements systems or the escalating cost? I will say, I do like the escalating costs because it just keeps people from being like, I want to hyper specialize in this one thing, and I'm going to spend all my points in this one thing, and I'm going to become unbelievably the best. You could still do that, but man, the diminishing returns kick in. And I'm okay with that, I actually think, for a certain extent. I think it actually probably improves like the feasibility of your character, and it prevents people from getting like insane skills of like 80 or something. So I don't know. I'd have to play. I mean, I'm not a D100 player, so you know, I can hardly say that I would know how they do that. All right. So everything we talked about here is here. Now, interesting. Going back to our character sheet here. You know, this wounds section has our strength bonus, our toughness bonus, our willpower bonus, and then there's a thing for hardy. That must be a talent. I think the dwarves got that. Never mind. Okay, so that's our wounds. Okay, so wounds are just hit points. And then we get into our classes and careers, and there's a lot of these. So before we get, believe it or not, before we get into classes and careers, I want to take a quick side tangent. And before we get into like all the different skills and all the different careers, I want to get back to the rules. And before we get into combat, I want to talk about fate and resilience, because I am interested in how these work. All right. Fate and resilience. So we talked about these before. I actually really liked how this is a one way that they can really define the species, right? That dwarves might have a lot of resilience. Humans could have a lot of luck or a lot of fate, a lot of resilience. Elves kind of have a lot of neither. Whether it's guts, luck, or the favor of the gods, there is something special about you. Fate and resilience represent the different ways that you stand out from the masses. Characters gain their starting fate and resilience in character creation. Both are related to a pool of points, fate to fortune, resilience to resolve. You may spend your points to achieve small benefits, and these pools will refill over the course of play. You may spend your fate or resilience points for a significant benefit during play, but this permanently reduces them. Oh, okay. So our initial fate and our initial resilience is not only is it the max value of our fortune and resolve, which we can tap into. It's more of like a short-term resource, but it'll give us a little bit of a benefit. But if we want to, we could spend fate or resilience, which apparently will give us a huge benefit, but then that point is forever lost, which means that the new maximum cap of our fortune or resolve is lower. All right, so and I like this. Although they are very rare and normally resolved for PCs, the GM may want to apply fate and resilience to noteworthy NPCs, such as a nemesis or a reoccurring character. Well said. It's very much like Ultima points from Fabula Ultima, right? Like, I don't want every character in the game, you know, like, for example, in Forbidden Lands, by default, every NPC can push. I hate that rule. But like, it should be special that should be for villains, right? A villain should have fate and resilience. They have a destiny. That's mostly for player characters and the villains. Important stuff. I like that. Anyways, player characters have a destiny. While their ultimate future is a mystery and there is no guaranteeing it will be glorious, heroic, or even pleasant, they are seemingly fated for something important. To begin this, you may begin play with a number of fate points. Fate points mark you out as being different from the rest of the denizens of the old world. They allow you to survive against impossible odds and prevail. Fate is directly related to your fortune. Fortune is the small bonuses, including the ability to re-roll failed tests or gain an edge as luck favors you, and the number you will have will likely fluctuate wildly during play. Fate determines how many fortune points you can have and be permanently spent in the most direst of circumstances to avoid death. All right, so fortune is the little resource. Fortune is the one that's easier to come back to. So we can spend a fortune point to turn luck to our advantage. We can re-roll a failed test. We can add a success level to a test after it's rolled. Or at the start of the round, we can choose when to act in that round and disregard initiative order. Okay. So this is more of like what we would traditionally think of as a hero point, right? Or spending a fatigue in like Root or something, or an Avatar. We can get a reroll. In Fate, for example, you can. I don't know if this is true, but in Fate, you can like invoke an aspect to reroll the Fate dice or to add +2 to the result of the Fate dice's roll. So it's very similar in that regard. And then there's this weird thing for initiative order. So that's what Fortune does. And remember, we get that back fairly, apparently easily. Fate, however, in fact, Fate. I know it said by pursuing our motivation, we get back our resolve. But I don't know if it said how we get back our fortune. Maybe we just get it back randomly. Anyways, spending Fate. Fate is a hard-coded resource. It does not replenish. You may spend a permanent Fate point to avoid death and survive. When you do this, choose one of the following outcomes. Die another day. Instead of dying, your character is knocked out, left for dead, swept away by a river. How did that miss? Your character completely avoids the incoming damage by some extraordinary fluke, such as slipping a bow just as about to collect, a weapon mysteriously jamming, or an unexpected source of light blinding an opponent. Your character continue on without penalty, but has no guarantee of survival in later rounds. Fortune is very Conan Sword and Sorcery. I absolutely agree, Ben. I completely agree. And also, I mean, Ben, let's also call it what it is. This is kind of essentially surrender, sacrifice from Fabula Ultima. But instead of it being, unlimited and you can just do it as you will, it's tied to a resource that you can only do it so many times before eventually it's like, okay, you've run out of you've run out of Fate. So yeah. So this is interesting because it's kind of like interesting because you're like, well, why wouldn't I ever just use this one? Right? Because this one keeps you in the encounter. And this one, you take no further part in the current encounter. But the thing is like, if you're losing really badly and you use this, it doesn't, you might have to spend another Fate the next round when you get killed. And you might have to spend another Fate the next round when you would get killed. If you die another day, it's like, it's a plot contrivance, but your character basically gets out of jail. They're out of the encounter, but they also they don't have to keep spending Fate. It's kind of a cool choice. Like if you're like, no, I'm going to stay in this fight, then you continue to risk potential future badness happening to you. Or you could, kind of cower out and say like, I get knocked down and I fall off the cliff of the mountain and everyone assumes I'm dead, but I'm actually fine. Anyways, that's cool. Oh, look at that. They describe this here. The first option takes you out of play, but allows you to fight another day. The second allows you to keep fighting side by side by your companions, but leaves you in significant danger, meaning you may need to spend more Fate rounds in later rounds to ensure your survival. Wow, nice. See, let me be very clear about something here. I read that rule and I sort of postulated on what the implication of that rule is. I like it that the rule book tells you. It's like, we're not trying to play coy with you. We're not trying to play like, oh, you have to read the secret subtext. No, it's being very overt and direct, and then it goes out and explains. See, this rule book is why rule books like these mean that you don't need people like me because it does a good job of explaining itself. Okay, here we go. You regain all fortune points at the start of every gaming session up to your current Fate. In addition, certain in-game encounters may also replenish or remove fortune points. Love it. Love it. Number one, session-based resources are great, even though they're not simulationist. But Fate and Fortune is such a whamby-pamby simulationist thing anyways. And it's a weird way because it's like a weird way of being like diegetically fated. And I know this is crazy, but or diegetically lucky. I find that people who are really, really, don't like meta currencies, like hero points, hero points or Fate points, but like from Fate. But when you call it like it's your character's luck, it's your character's Fate skill, your Fate ability, you had to choose it during character creation. Your character is destined for something greater. It for some odd reason, it makes it easier for like the diehard simulationists to accept it. Because now they're like, oh, now we are simulating the world in which your character is very lucky and your character is very fortunate. And this feels actually like we're simulating something here correctly. But I also love that it's a stick and a carrot. That means this is a resource. It's a resource that we as a GM can use in order to benefit or penalize certain courses of action, right? And that could be a really great way to, again, stick and carrot behavior as a GM. All right, Silverwolf, take care. But yeah, I've liked what I've seen so far too. I mean, it is very crunchy, but you know, that's okay. That's not always the worst thing. Yes, very, very Fritz Leiber. Very, yeah, I agree. Your GM may, okay, so we thought we couldn't get any fate. Your GM may grant you a fate point for an act of extreme heroism, bravery, or significance. Normally, this only happens at the end of the successful end of an important adventure. So again, I love it. This is like a huge stick. Huge carrot. And this is the point where it says, look, if you want to play your character and do something awesome and go over the top with something super, I like, by the way, that it says heroism, bravery, or extreme significance. I like the idea that, like, in this really pivotal moment, maybe your character, stabs the elector count and claims the rune fang for himself of that, of that county, of that duchy. Well, all right, it's not really heroic or brave, but it's significant. It's extreme significant, especially when you learn that your character, when people realize that your character has been, secretly seeking the throne from which he was dispossessed. And you're like, the GM's like, shit, you just reached your long-term objective, 500 XP. Also, you gain a fate point. That's pretty sweet. Anyways, very cool. A little side note here. Some players prefer short sessions of a few hours. Others prefer day-long marathons. If your group prefers longer sessions, replenish fortune points at narratively appropriate moments every 4 hours. So nice. They're basically saying, look, you're supposed to get these things every, session of play, and it's usually about 4 hours. If you're going to play for 10 hours, maybe give them a refresh or two. All right. So while fate points, now let's get into resilience and resolve. And again, I like this call out. I like this sidebar. This is just smart play, right? All right. Or smart writing. It's not smart play, but resilience and resolve. While fate points represent your destiny, perhaps chosen by some distant, uncaring deity, resilience is an indication of your personal drive and determination to endure and overcome no matter the obstacles that you face. So already we get this really cool distinction, right? It's almost like we were talking about Avatar, and we talk about how there's the two skills, right? The one is rely on your skills and training. And that allows you to accomplish great deeds, but it's relying on you. And the other one is trusting fate, trusting luck, push your luck. And it's basically like YOLO, let Jesus take the wheel. And I like the idea that there's this idea that, fate and fortune, that's not you. That's not your drive. That's not your personal, right? That is the universe. That sort of, that's the pattern. The pattern weaves as the pattern wills. By the way, side note, real great, easy way to do Taverin in this setting is to just give them a shitload of fate points, right? Right? Think about it. Taverin would have a ton of fortune. They could re-roll a punch. They could add +1s all the time, but also they would be able to get out of jail free all the time as the pattern weaves itself around you. Anyways, just as a side note, it's a great way to sort of represent Taverin. And in a certain sense, like the humans in this setting are already kind of Taverin because of that they start with a higher amount of fate. Anyways, I like the distinction between this, the one being sort of like the universe and it's not really involving you. And that's why it's just tied to, it comes back once a session. But remember, we saw that resolve and resilience recover as you fulfill your motivations. And so that means it's very much tied to your drive, to your personal, how much you are invested in this. And I like the distinction between these two metacurrencies. I think it leads to different feeling at the table and a different sort of output from the game. Anyways, like fate, resilience is an indication of your personal drive and determination to endure and overcome no matter the obstacles you face. Like fate, resilience is directly linked to a pool of points. This called resolve. Resolve points are spent to push through minor obstacles, such as ignoring the negative effects of critical wounds or removing conditions. Resilience determines that upper limit of resolve points and can be permanently spent. So I love that. That's the nice kind of, symmetry. Okay, fate's the cap and you can spend it to do big shit. Resilience is the cap and you can spend it to do big shit. It's permanent unless otherwise noted. Resolve and fortune are sort of the temporary resource. And I love resources operating on different tiers. I've talked about this in many different streams, but I love the idea of long-term resources, short-term resources. I even like intermediate-term resources. I'm a fan of them. I like resource exchange systems, but that's like the gamist in me, but I like that. All right. Okay. So spending resolve. You may spend a resolve point to draw upon your inner reserves, maybe confronting a terrifying ogre without flinching or ignoring the effects of powerful blows. All right, you can spend a resolve to become immune to psychology until the end of the next round. And remember, psychology is, fear, terrified, stupefied. I'm trying to think of the classic psychologies, fleeing, that kind of stuff. So basically, you can spend your resolve and ignore anything that's like messing you up. And also remember psychology we saw earlier, there might be like you love somebody, you have a deep friendship for somebody, and you're like, no, I can't be distracted right now. I need to spend a resolve. We could also ignore all modifiers from critical wounds for 1 round. Or we could remove 1 condition. If you remove the prone condition, regain a wound as you surge to your feet. Very cool. So I like that it's just immune for a round to psychology, basically immune mental for a round, immune physical for a round, and not really immune, but more like ignore mental consequences for a round, ignore physical consequences for 1 round, or remove 1 condition. So it's very 1, 1, 1, 1 for 1, right? Do you see like the sort of the repetition there? Do you see like the sort of, I don't know what to call it, the sort of game design alliteration? It's very, Mark Rosewater talks about this a lot when people talked about the hatred, or not the hatred, but like people complaining a lot about the card Gristlebrand. And for those of you who don't know what Gristlebrand is, Gristlebrand is a Magic the Gathering card. It's a demon. That was kind of like the headliner demon of the set for for this one particular set called Avacyn. And Gristlebrand, right, is a there we go. Gristlebrand, cheaper than I ever remember it being. Gristlebrand was a 7/7, right? Had 7 power and 7 toughness, and it was a flying life-linking demon, right? Look at him, nasty. And you could pay 7 life, and you could draw 7 cards, and he cost 8, right? Like, oops, maybe it should have been 8, 8, 8, 8, 8, or 7, 7, 7, 7, 7. It's one of those things where it's just like, it feels weird that it's off by that. I like that this is 1, 1, 1. Also, even if you do the prone one, you get +1. I like it. All right, what if we choose to spend resilience, though? That's the big daddy, right? All right. You may also choose to spend resilience points to defy the corruption curling within, or to succeed where it seems certain that you would fail. Here you have the following 2 options. Number 1, I deny you. You may choose not to develop a rolled mutation. Because you do not mutate, you do not lose any corruption points. All right, we don't really know much about corruption, but what I'm sensing here is that you gain corruption. And then if a mutation happens to you, and by the way, chaos is very important to the old Warhammer world. All magic actually flows from chaos. Chaos actually is more of like a realm. It was originally side tangent note, Warhammer lore time. The idea is basically very similar actually to Earth Dawn. Maybe Earth Dawn took it from Warhammer. Is that you have like sort of the material plane, the plane of body, the plane of physicality, and then there is this sort of the realm that now is called the realm of chaos, but really think of it as like the realm of thought, the realm of sorcery, right? The realm of magic, where physical reality isn't really a thing. It's mental. It's all thoughts and feelings and emotions. It's a realm of thought and energy, very much like the beginning of the Twilight Zone. Anyways, the problem is that when certain races started to develop and become very, very large, the power of their psychic, their aggregate psychic will started to affect and change the sort of space beyond the world of men, and the most brute urges, the most base urges, the most diabolic urges, sort of naturally sort of coalesced and formed into these things that are now called chaos gods. And, so essentially, living creatures beget the corruption of chaos. It's their frailty that reflects in the chaos warp. Anyways, long story short, the realm of chaos, also called the realm of sorcery, is the source of all magic, but it's also a warping, mutating, destroying, corrupting, ravaging force. It is anathema to the law and order of the plane. So Warhammer is very much rooted in those old school D&D law and chaos sort of opposition. Good's a little, hard to find in the Warhammer world. I would say there's very little lawful good societies or characters in the game. Maybe like Teclis or Tyrion might be considered to be lawful good, but most characters are, lawful neutral or lawful evil. Really, it's more about the will of the state than it is the freedom of the individual and the morality of the situation. It's like, we're fighting to avoid destruction here from these corrupting and all powerful forces that we cannot reside. Anyways, as a result, being exposed to and fighting against these powerful magical forces tends to corrupt you and mutate you. And so apparently in this game, you gain corruption points as you're probably exposed to these nastier things, but you could choose to mutate. And it sounds like the mutation, it's like by letting the mutation out, your corruption drops because you sort of given it a physical space. Anyways, I thought that was interesting. All right. So you can basically not get mutated, or you can choose, I will not fail. Rather than roll the result of a test, you just choose the number instead, allowing you to succeed in even the direst of situations. What a powerful rule. In an opposed test, you always win by at least one skill level. If you cause a critical, you choose the hit location rather than randomizing it. At first I was like, I like that this is just, you can choose not to fail a test, but I'm like, but it always sucks when you do it before you roll. You can even choose to do this on a test already failed. Perfect. So we have discussed before, and Ben is always ahead of the game. We've discussed before on this channel, GNS, and how I use it, which is not necessarily the same way that Ron Edwards used it. I use it to discuss mechanics. I think that there are styles of gameplay, and I think that there are mechanics in role-playing games which promote those certain types of those certain type of role-playing game experiences. A lot of people, we've talked about G plus S games, gamist games plus simulationist games. Third edition D&D in many ways is a gamist plus simulationist game. 5th edition D&D or 4th edition D&D lowers the simulationism and increases the gamism. And both those games really don't have any narrative effect at all. And a lot of people said, and even back when we did that, we were talking about narrative plus gamist games, N plus G. It's like, well, what is that? Well, like a lot of the crunchier Powered by the Apocalypse games are sort of narrative plus G. Some of the 2D20 games from Modiphius are narrativist plus gamist, right? There's an intricate game system going around there, but ultimately it's being done to design a narrative. What I'm saying, there's a game to be played. This game feels like, at the time, people were always like, what's an S plus N game? And I wasn't really sure. Kind of the best answer I had was Legend of the Five Rings. And yes, Fabula Ultima is narrative plus gamist. That's a great example of, yes, Fabula Ultima is like probably the best example of narrativist plus gamist, actually, even better than PBTA. But a lot of people said, what is simulationist plus narrativist? Is that even a thing? Those things feel diametrically opposed. This game is SNN. I think it is. I think it really is. And I think it's really delivering on it in a weird way. And, Elia, our resident simulationist champion, says mechanizing fate, fortune, luck is inherently non-simulationist. Oh no, simulationism is based on action, reaction, and science. Luck is not measured; it just is. It's interesting that you say that it's not simulationist, because we're assuming that this is something that is in this game, and it is something that is essentially quantifiable, right? But I don't know. I think it's, I mean, obviously fate and resilience here are very much a narrativist mechanic, right? And I know what you're saying. Like, I don't get it. It doesn't make like a story happen. No, that's not what narrativist means. It's basically a way for the game to not just be completely determined by random dice rolls. And it's a way for there to sort of be an agenda that the game mechanics allow you to, give you a tool that you can use to sort of change the outcomes of the game's agenda towards a presumably cooler or more heroic or more story appropriate, storytelling. I didn't expect to see these mechanics in this game. I'd be curious to know if they were in the original game. So yes, I agree that this is not full SN, full simulationism. This resilience part is the narrative element. So very cool. Leopold says, Fate has been around, yes, since version 1. Fate was definitely in earlier editions, not sure about resilience. And Omanao also confirming. Okay. Yes, Against the Dark Master had elements of narrativism, 100%. 100%. Yeah, this game has, look, it's a D100 system. Obviously the difference between these two games is that Against the Dark Master sort of has, I think, maybe a little bit more of a grounded vibe. And maybe like your characters are supposed to be more, heroic champions fighting the good fight against the Dark Master. This seems a little bit more, rough and tumble. Yeah, so saving permanent resilience to rebuff the influence of chaos is wise, but it does not remove your corruption points, meaning mutation is still perilously close. Resolve is regained whenever you act according to your motivation. During play, whenever you feel you have done this, you may ask the GM if you can recover 1 or more resolve points. Fantastic. So your motivation is the way that you recover your resolve. It's a very narrative. That's a super narrativist mechanic. But one could almost argue it could almost be simulationist, because, I'm following my motivation. So my resolve is improving, right? It's just a question of, can you mechanize resolve and call it simulationism? And I think you can. I don't know. So that's why I think this is that weird hybrid. I think you can. The GM may grant a resilience point for an act of extreme importance to your motivation, permanently nourishing your soul. But such an event will be very rare. After many adventures. So Griselda is a nun with the motivation Sigmar. And by the way, Sigmar is sort of it's like kind of the version of the emperor. He was the first emperor, but he's also now worshipped as a god. After many adventurers, Griselda finally finances a new temple to Sigmar in her home village of Velton, not far from Nuln. The GM recognizes the importance of this to Griselda's faith and grants her a permanent resilience point. Very cool. All right, so that's how fate and resilience work. So it's 9:00. What else do we want to see? Again, I don't think we're going to have time to go through. Probably. We can kind of probably imagine how combat works, unless there's something crazy here. We determine surprise. We begin a round. We take turns. The round ends. We repeat until everybody's dead. So that doesn't seem like that's like the most crazy thing here. Magic tends to be very complicated. The problem with careers is there's 500 pages of careers. Jonka says, I'm late. Is this a class system? Jonka, here's chapter 2. Class and career. All right. All right, so here we go. We'll just quickly look at how careers work. All right. So remember, our classes organize careers. Your career is your job when you're not adventuring. That's a good, interesting. Okay. That's an interesting way to think of it. Okay. Your career is your job when you're not off adventuring or having adventures done to you, as often may be the case. It describes your training, social class, and your future prospects. Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay groups similar careers into classes. So the idea, it feels like, is that you're an adventurer, right? Your career is more of just like, that just kind of is what your day job is, Anyways, so the careers can be sort of broadly grouped into these classes. Each career has 4 levels, each progressively better than the last. If you take a look at Apothecary, the first academic career, you can see that the 4 levels are Apprentice Apothecary, Apothecary, Master Apothecary, and Apothecary General. When choosing a career for a new character, you always start at the first level of the career. Each character career affects how they will grow through experience. Each career offers 3 forms of advances. You can advance your characteristics, you can advance your skills, and you can advance your talents, which you use by spending our experience points that we are earning. Each career has an advance scheme governing its characteristic advances. The advance scheme shows your character's 10 characteristics, 3 marked with a cross, 1 marked with crossed axes on a brass background, and 1 marked with a skull on silver, and the last one marked with a shield on gold. Okay. The 3 marked cross are characteristics you can advance in the first level of your career. When you enter the second level of the career, the crossed axes characteristic becomes available. When you enter the 3rd level, we get the skull. And when you enter the 4th and last level, the shield characteristic becomes available. The cost in XP of a characteristic advance is shown in the skill table above, which we repeated. Okay. So basically, as we get deeper into a career, we can spend our XP on more characteristics. All right. You can advance all the skills listed for your career level and lower. So if you're at level 1, you can access all the skills under level 1. But if you're level 3, you could access all the skills under 3, 2, and 1. Makes sense? Characters will inevitably want to advance characteristics and skills that are not listed in their careers. That's fine if the GM feels it's appropriate, but it costs double. They also may want you to find a teacher or otherwise play out this unusual education. Non-career characteristics and skill advances cost double the amount of XP. Normally, non-career talents may not be purchased with XP, but Between Adventures provides an opportunity to purchase non-career advances as if they were career advances and give you the possibility. All right, there's a lot of flexibility here, a lot of customization. The symbols don't bear any relationship with each other. That's not well done. I agree. That's a little bit weird. All right. Completing a career. Completing a career represents mastering your current vocation and being ready to move on to something new. To complete a career, you must have a number of advances listed below in all of your career levels characteristics. To complete a career below, you must have the number of advances listed below in all your career levels characteristics and in 8 of your career levels available skills. You must also have at least 1 talent from your current career level. So if I'm reading this correctly, we would need 5 advances in each of our career levels characteristics, 5 advances in 8 of our career level skills. Isn't that like hundreds of experience points? Oh, they say yes, that is right. Okay. Just because you have completed a career does not mean you have to move up to a new one. Moving career is always entirely up to you. If you wish to stay in the first level of Pauper forever, that's completely fine. If you have completed your current career level, you can enter your next career level or any lower career level for 100 XP. So if you completed Hunter level 2, you could exit to Tracker, which is the level 3 Hunter, or Trapper. You could go back down to Hunter level 1 for 100 XP. But you can't go to Huntmaster, which is the level 4. With the GM's permission, though, you can skip career levels. This is normally driven by in-game events. For example, a Scion inherits a noble estate during play. So the GM offers Noble Lord, which is straight to level 4, as a potential change of career. Like normal, changing your career costs 100 experience points or 200 if you have not. If you have completed your current career level, you can enter the first level of any career from your class, so that group that you sort of have, for 100 XP, or 200 XP if you have not completed your current career level. If you want to enter the first level of a career from a different class, this costs an extra 100 XP. Note, your GM may require in-game justifications for career changes. For example, that totally makes sense, right? Like, I'm a warrior, and then you're like, I'm going to spend the XP, and I'm going to become a wizard. Like, so again, you know, there's a certain amount of sense here. Let me go back to the careers and classes, right? So, like, let's take a look at our ranger, all right? So if our character started off as a witch hunter or a bounty hunter, right? It makes sense that it would be easy for them and reasonable for them and not have to pay any sort of real, you have to pay a little bit of a price, but you don't really have to give it too much of an in-game explanation of how your bounty hunter became a messenger, became a road warden, became a witch hunter, right? Like, not only does that cost less experience points, it also doesn't really require you to really make an excuse for why that might happen. But if our bounty hunter ranger suddenly wanted to become a noble courtier, right? Or a, priest or a lawyer, that suddenly, not only does that feel like, it would require more in-game expenditure of experience points, but also it kind of makes sense that the game's like, but you kind of also have to sort of explain what's going on here. Because that just doesn't make sense that that's something that your character could just, pick up along the way, which I like. All right. I'm kind of skipping this stuff here on status. Sorry. Lots of stuff about status and what your level is and all this other stuff. All right. So let's take a look. What did I say I was going to be? I said I was going to be a racketeer. All right. So here's our racketeer. Oh, each career fits on a single page. You got to love it. That is very nice. Everything you need is on one page. Obviously, you need to look up what all these things do, but okay. So our racketeer starts off with the ability to increase 4 of the characteristics. They can increase their ballistic skill. They can advance their initiative, their agility, and their dex. If we got to level 2 racketeer, which is, we start as a thug. We're not even really a full racketeer. Wait, everyone's saying I did that wrong. Oh, I can increase weapon skill on top. Oh. Wait, so my racketeer can't increase initiative and agility? That seems weird. Isn't that what, like, you would think a racketeer would be good at increasing? Interesting. Well, I feel like that's very silly. I thought anyways, all right. Well, okay. All right. So anyways, we start at Thug, which is the weird cross. And we get weapon skill, strength, and toughness. And then if we get those up and we get our skills up, we can eventually become a racketeer, and that opens up fellowship. And then a gang boss, which opens up willpower, and then crime lord, which opens up intelligence. But that's all makes sense. But it still seems really weird to me that a racketeer can't increase agility and dexterity. I guess maybe I'm thinking of racketeer as a different way. But like, they're part of this like rogue class. So I would think that would be sort of what they would go for. But I guess the racketeer is more of a, I don't know. Yeah, more of a mafioso type, I guess. All right. Fair enough. All right. Meba Man says, maybe we career. All right, let's just go to thief. All right, there we go. Note, elves cannot be a thief. All right, so here we go. So elves, okay. Maybe, again, the idea of rogue, all right, so here we go. So our thief can start off by taking advances in initiative, agility, and willpower. All right, I'm fine with that. And then our prowler, I should say. And then we become a thief. And then, by the way, our status eventually gets all the way up to silver 3. Anyways, at our level 1, our skills are athletics, climb, cool, dodge, endurance, intuition, perception, and stealth. So to advance, we need to have 5 advances in all of those skills. Am I reading that right? We also have 3 talents available to us and what we start with. Silver 3 is pretty low. I know it goes to gold, so. So interestingly, okay. And now, as a reminder, if we advanced to thief, all of the skills would be available to us, but only the talents of the current level would be available to us. I believe. You do start with 40 split between. Oh, right. During character creation, our skills don't start at 0. So, yeah, we do start with advances. You're right, Meba Man. Thank you. That's very true. Very, 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 very true. We have a certain built-in expectation of what something is and what something means. It's very true. Okay. So, yeah, there's not really a whole lot to a career. I mean, obviously, it tells you what skills you can get and what talents you can get. But other than that, now I'm assuming that some of these talents, are probably bespoke to a certain career, right? Like break and enter, might not be something that, if you want to get break and enter the talent. Let's take a look here. Let's see. The investigator gets it at their 3rd level. The watchman gets it. That's funny. The bailiff gets it. The bounty hunter. The wrecker. That guy looks mean. The grave robber. And, of course, our thief. And many talents can be selected multiple times. Now, I will say, this is where the rubber is going to meet the road. Because so far, this game has seemed very narrativist, very simulationist, and a little bit more narrativist than I thought. Fate, resilience, fortune, resolve. Also, the fact that I can. By the way, another nice game feature. Fate and fortune both start with an F. Resilience and resolve both start with an R. It makes you connect the two. Very smart. Talents is where, and again, the skills are very simulationist in their application. I'm wondering if talents are going to be where we get the gaminess, because are talents going to start to feel like Pathfinder feats? Are they going to start to feel like 4E powers? So let's take a look. Let's see what this breaking and entering thing does. Max strength bonus. Tests. Melee when forcing or breaking inanimate objects. You are an expert at quickly breaking down doors and forcing entry. You may add +1 damage for each level in this talent when determining damage against inanimate objects, such as windows, doors, and similar. Okay. That doesn't seem like too gamey. Because it's not like saying, like, only by taking break and enter can your character break and enter. No, they're saying anybody can break and enter. Your character just does it a little bit better by doing some additional damage. That seems pretty simple to me. This is actually another good bookish. When you are as at home in a library as a seaman at the sea or a farmer at a farming. When using research skill, you may reverse the dice of any failed test if this would turn it into a success. It's not saying you need this to be able to use a library. It's saying that your character basically gets essentially 2 shots at the 2 bites at the apple. Okay. If you have a 40 strength, you can get breaking and entering 4 times. That's what the max means. Okay. So remember, strength bonus is the tens digit of our strength score. So if we could take this talent multiple times, which seems pretty crazy, but I don't know why you would take this talent multiple times. I don't know why you would take this talent a lot. I don't know, but +1 damage is hard to, what is the percentage bonus on reversing dice like that? Well, Beowulf, it depends on how likely you are to succeed. If you are 50-50, if you need a 50%, then reversing the dice like that gives you, I believe, close to 75% chance of success. Basically, it's basic. It's almost, but not quite like re-rolling. It's not quite though. The probability is actually a little bit more skewed because obviously there's a chance where you get a 55 and swapping it doesn't do anything and you fail, even though you could swap. Whereas like a 4 and a 6 is a 6 and a 4 and 4 and a 6. Lures are gamist talents because they were required to spellcast, I think. But that's not necessarily super gamist. I think we can all agree that it might take extra special skill to spellcast. That feels correct even within the fiction of the game. Where gamist mechanics come up is like, for example, in Pathfinder 2nd Edition, we use this all the time, there's a feat called Demolition Charge, which lets you use your alchemist bombs to blow up an inanimate object. But per the rules of Pathfinder 2nd Edition, you cannot use your bombs to blow up inanimate objects. They only work against foes and people, living creatures. You need a special feat to give you that ability to do something which intrinsically feels like something that anybody could do. So, this isn't saying you need break and enter in order to do break and entering. Now, I don't know. There's a lot of talents here. It remains to be seen. Bookish also adds a % chance to succeed past the first time you take a talent. Why is that? Like, what about this? Because this says you add +1 damage for each level in the talent, but this one doesn't. How do I know that? Like, why would I take multiple ranks of bookish? Is there a reason? Or maybe I wouldn't? Anyways. Okay. Yep. All right. Someone says it's in the rules. I'll believe you. All right. So, I mean, talents seem like they're, kind of cool. They're not like super OP or anything. Oh, remember we said every human gets doomed. At the age of 10, a priest of Mor, which is like the god of death, called a doomsayer, took you aside to foretell your death in an incense-laden coming-of-age ritual called the Dooming. In conjunction with your GM, come up with a suitable dooming. Should your character die in a fashion that matches your dooming, your next character gains a bonus of half the total XP your dead character accrued during play. Oh, that's awesome. Every talent gives +1 skill level to the specified skill. Oh, it does. That's just random. How do I know that? Oh, here we go. If you could take now, all right, I'll admit this rule feels like it's kind of buried here a little bit. If you could take a talent multiple times, it may have a special rule for what this means written into the description. Further, it may have an associated skill marked under tests. See talent format. If so, for each time you have the talent, you gain +1 skill success level on any successful use of skill tied to that talent. Okay, it says see talent format. The fuck is talent format? Tests. If the talent is tied to one or more tests your character can make, the affected tests are listed here. Talents tied to a test come with an extra rule. For each time you have taken the talent, you gain +1 skill level on any successful use of that skill tied to the talent. Okay, so it took us a little bit to get here, but for me anyways. So bookish, not only does it give us this ability to reverse the dice, but the test is research. So for each rank in bookish we have talent, it gives us +1. Now, to be fair, most of the time it's going to be cheaper. Oh, but it's +1 success level. So that's even better. That's interesting, right? Question for people at home. Does the +1 success level matter even if we fail the test? Like if I do a dynamic test and I get like a failure, or if I do a simple test and I had like 8 ranks in bookish, does that do anything? I feel like the answer is it would do nothing. But only if you succeed. Okay, so no, very interesting. So this is like you get to succeed bigger, but it doesn't actually really help you do better. Yes, on any successful use of the talent. Yeah. That's cool game design. I like it. It's fiddly as fuck. It is fiddly. It's very fiddly, but I like the design. But you're paying complication. You know, that's the problem, you know. But it is fiddly, you know, because you got to remember it's like, oh, you succeeded, but then you fail. But then when you succeeded, you got this, and then you get this. And which talent do I have? Any talents which apply to this, you know, things? Anyways, yeah, it's a general rule, and it's totally buried. Yeah. But yeah, this is where the fiddly bits begin. Yeah, this is very fiddly. This. No offense. This is not really particularly gamist because, in my particular opinion, this isn't a fun game. I'm not saying that in a bad way. I'm just saying this isn't like, oh, look at these fun game mechanics to make the game, more like a board game. These are the mechanics where this is where sometimes simulationism can get a little lost in the weeds because of how, dumb number crunchy it could be. When I've played this, Zavion says, when I've played this, I just keep a list of my skill uses. I got skill SL Busan. Yeah, that makes sense. Players need to be on their game or use Foundry. As we stop that question for people at home or people who are here, how does this game's digital footprint? I'm assuming it's on Roll20. I'm assuming it's on Foundry. I'll let the people in chat who have used this game, is there a preference? Do you prefer Foundry, Roll20? Is there a different implementation? Thaddeus says that the Foundry implementation is amazing. All right. Well, that's good to hear. Definitely a fun, assuming it does well, I could see that being nice. Warhammer Master Hammer. Thaddeus says it's one of the best that they've seen. All right. So let's cover one more thing. We got 60 people here. You guys can decide what we're going to take a look at. I'm going to do a quick poll. All right. Last thing. We can look at corruption, injury, psychology, or I won't put magic because everybody would just say magic. Disease and infection. Thaddeus says, don't do magic, please. It has been entirely revised in a separate book. All right, you love to see it. To be fair, for those of you who don't know, in the Warhammer miniature game, magic has, that was the original, that was the big daddy of miscast tables, right? Like when you're casting your spells, God, it felt sometimes like you were more likely to miscast than actually to cast a spell. You could cast it with overwhelming force or overpowering force. But if you rolled like double ones in your casting pool, depending on what edition of the game you're playing, your character would miscast, and frequently your wizard would explode. They would, burn into flames. They would blow up and damage everybody around them. They might get sucked into the warp and get killed. So it was always pretty hectic and, crazy. C7 says, I like Warhammer injury rules so much I use it in Pathfinder 2. All right. Well, corruption is winning. Alia says, I voted for injury mechanics. I've come to enjoy them. That sounds like a blast, getting blown up or sucked into a vortex. I can't decide if you mean that seriously. Well, the idea is that, magic is kind of broken in OP, and in D&D games, there's no reason to not be a wizard because it's super safe. Now, I get it. From a game perspective, Kyle, getting, hey, I want to use my character ability. Cool, go ahead and use your character ability. You get sucked into warp. That sucks. That is a bad game mechanic. Just to be clear. But it balances the simulationism, and that you got to pick a battle, or you got to make wizards the same as fighters, and that's what 4th edition did. Or you make wizards broken in OP, and they don't have any drawbacks, and then you get 3rd edition or 5th edition D&D. So those are your choices. Whew. All right, I'll give this one more minute. People want injury, but corruption takes the win. All right, with 44% of our votes, 43%. Injury came in close at 37, but corruption wins it. So we're going to go take a look at corruption. And again, the power of chaos cannot be denied in Warhammer. It's not a question like of will you be corrupted, right? It's when. Every Festag, Sigmarite priests preach from high pulpits about the dangers of the ruinous powers. What are the ruinous powers? Well, those are the forces of chaos, of course. Khorne, Nurgle, Tzeentch, and Slaanesh. Praise be their names. Actually, I am unabashedly not a fan of chaos. Never liked them. Never liked the demons. Never liked the warriors of chaos. Never liked the demons of chaos. I kind of like the beastmen of chaos a little bit because they remind me of Trollocs, and I like Trollocs. All right. Anyways, good folk have to avoid the temptations of demons whispering from every shadow. They declare all souls are in perpetual peril, and they might be right. Corruption points are used to show the slow, gradual slip of your soul to the dark gods of chaos. Whenever you expose to a potential source of corruption, you may accrue corruption points. The more you have, the closer you draw to chaos, and the darker your souls until you eventually change. If you, gaining corruption points. During play, there are too many primary routes to gaining corruption. Dark deals and corrupting influence. Dark deals. Oh.
Dungeons and Dragons. Satan's game.
Or is it Warhammer Fantasy Role-Playing? Sometimes you just have to succeed. Most commonly, this means passing an important test. Should such a test fail, you can use a fortune point to re-roll the test, hopefully passing the second time. But what if it fails again? Or if you have no fortune point remaining? Then it's time for a dark deal. You can purposefully choose to take a corruption point to re-roll a test, even if it has already been re-rolled. This is always a choice for you, never for the GM. Although there is nothing wrong with the GM gently reminding you that you could try again. After all, what's the worst that could happen? Can you do that like as many times as you want? That's great. That's a great mechanic. That's temptation. That's temptation. Players want to succeed. This is a free reroll. That's temptation. That's nice. Corruption points are usually gained. So the other way we could do it is corrupting influences. Corruption points are usually gained by exposure to a place, a person, or an object that has been tainted by chaos, or especially a situation beloved to one of the dark gods. If you encounter a corrupting influence, attempt a challenging endurance test or a challenging cool test as determined by the GM. Usually physical influences are resisted with endurance and spiritual is resisted with cool. The stronger the corrupting influence, the more success levels you will need to avoid it. The following provides some examples of corrupting influences with the number of skill. I always want to call it skill levels, success levels needed to avoid it completely. Minor. If a test is failed, you get 1 corruption point. You might witness a lesser demon, just come into contact with warpstone or a chaos-tainted artifact. Or maybe it's none of those things, but giving in to despair, rage, or excess, or the need to change your lot, which, by the way, are the 4 hallmarks of chaos. Being near warpstone, Moderate exposure is damaging to every soul. If a test is failed, gain 2 corruption points. If you get a marginal success, you get 1 point. If you need to get 2 or more successes to gain no corruption. Major is 3 points. So you would need to get an impressive success just to get no corruption. And that's anything like just witnessing a greater demon. Can you name the 4 greater demons? Of course I can. There's the Bloodthirster of Khorne. There's the Great Unclean One of Nurgle. There's the Lord of Change of Tzeentch. And there is the Keeper of Secrets from Slaanesh. Prolonged contact, making a deal with the demon, consuming warpstone, prolonged exposure to an environment steeped with Dahar. No one is left unscathed to the ruinous powers. Eventually, even the strongest fall, their minds and bodies twisting into new, unrecognizable forms. And again, this is very thematic. I mean, this is what Warhammer is all about. I mean, in a certain sense, there's a little bit of nihilism to it. That the chaos cannot be beaten. It can be contained for a time. It can be turned back, but at what cost? And very frequently, the cost is to the heroes. And, society is allowed to persevere for another month or another day or another year or another decade, but at the cost, that to be, there are no old heroes, there are no corrupt and free heroes in Warhammer. It's kind of part of that grim, people say it's grimdark. That's what it means, and to a certain extent, it's kind of like Lord of the Rings. I mean, for the most part, everybody gets away just fine, right? But Frodo, right? Frodo, imagine if like every character was kind of going for the Frodo, right? So as corruption ravages your soul, the warping breath of chaos whispers within, fanning your flesh into fresh new forms or fracturing your psyche with exquisite knowledge it can never unlearn. First, should you ever gain more corruption points than your willpower plus your toughness bonus? So this is like a pretend characteristic, right? Is there a space for that on our character sheet? It's corruption on the back? No, it's not. So it's a pretend characteristic. Doesn't have a name. I'm kind of surprised it doesn't have a name, but it is kind of a surprise characteristic. Anyways, so if we ever have more corruption than our willpower plus toughness, immediately make a challenging endurance test. If passed, you hold off the corruption for now, but we'll have to test the next time you gain corruption points. If you fail, your body or mind is about to mutate. First, lose corruption points equal to your willpower bonus as you mutate. Next, roll percentile dice and refer to the following table to determine if it is your body or your mind that blossoms anew. And this is such a fucking lore win. Such a fucking lore win that elves' bodies cannot be mutated by chaos, only the mind. That is so awesome. That dwarves are very resilient to it, but that humans are very frail to corruption of the flesh. Oh, that is like such a good. It's just such a good lore win. Again, if you know the history of the Aesir, that is the high elves, and how they came to be and what they do and all this other stuff. It's good stuff. A soul can only withstand so much corruption before it collapses. And okay, so once you roll this, then you roll on this table. A soul can only withstand so much corruption before it collapses upon itself, leaving a mutated gibbering mess, aka a chaos spawn. Should you survive long enough to gain more mutations than your toughness bonus or more mental corruptions than your willpower bonus, you have fallen to chaos. Your soul completely lost to the uncaring chaos gods. At this point, it's time to make a new character. Your current character is now damned, becoming an NPC controlled by the GM. How would we lose corruption points? Once the claws of the dark gods have sunk into their soul, removing that vile stain is difficult, but not impossible. Beyond the less than desirable option of losing corruption points by gaining mutations, the other two methods are dark whispers and absolution. Even considering the inscrutable plans of the dark gods is enough to break a pious man's sanity. So, trying to fathom their intent and why they reach out to twist one mortal soul or another is not just foolish, it's extraordinarily dangerous. But reach out they do. The GM may ask to spend one of your corruption points to use the darkness building in your soul to twist your actions. The choice to do this or not is always in your hands. But if you agree, you lose one corruption point. Examples of what may be asked: letting an enemy escape, accidentally shooting an ally, falling asleep on a watch. And remember, so, I mean, this is compelling. It's like, but it's negative compelling, right? Because compelling is like, hey, I'm going to give you this good thing. There's positive reinforcement, negative reinforcement, positive punishment, and negative punishment. So this is negative punishment. So this is where we're taking away something bad to encourage a certain type of behavior. And that's not something you usually see too much in games. Right? You usually see positive rewards, not negative punishments. And to be fair, negative punishments and positive rewards are both good things, but they come from a very different kind of perspective, right? It's instead of giving someone a carrot, you're taking away the stick that's beating them. It feels like a win, but really all they're doing is getting back to normal. Anyways, but again, the person makes the choice. Of course, if you deny the GM and choose to do none of these things, you keep your corruption point. All right. And great sidebar. Glad that they put this in here. Used sparingly, corruption points can be great as Faustian deals are made for rerolls and traded back for memorable role-playing moments as minor betrayals spread. But if you're playing with a group that doesn't really understand the old world, the points can accrue very quickly, sending characters into a spiral of mutation and madness. This should probably be avoided. Mutation is effectively a death sentence if discovered, so it's important new players are cautioned when their actions may lead to corruption. Players should be warned that warpstone should not be touched or approached, basically saying, look, people might go, oh, this is sweet. I'm going to consume all this corruption. Good advice. All right, so what can happen to us? Physical corruption tables. All right. Take time to describe how it manifests. Add as many gruesome details as you want. In all cases, if your mutation is obvious, you not only suffer significant penalties to fellowship tests as determined by the circumstances, but people will likely flee from your presence, the watch will be called, witch hunters will descend, and your life will swiftly become very difficult. Inverted face. Gotta love the weirdness of it. Mental corruptions may be less obvious, but can be just as devastating. This is an opportunity to portray your character in a whole new, potentially horrific way. So again, getting into that sort of grim, dark kind of Call of Cthulhu, sanity losing, spiraling. I'm not saying it's like a guaranteed thing, but it's kind of guaranteed. And yeah, some of these mutations are mechanically beneficial, which also very much fits with the Warhammer game. What we can also do absolution. As corruption points build, we can feel the oppressive fists of the gods, dark gods cribbing around us. However, there may be situations where corruption could be removed if we seek absolution, cleansing a profane temple, although the very act may expose you to more corruption, completing a holy pilgrimage and receiving a blessing from a high priest, destroying an unholy artifact, joining a holy order, and dedicating your life to one of the gods opposed to chaos. Very cool. Let's see here. The Warhammer novels are definitely not Lord of the Rings. No, they are not. And yes, there's also Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay only thrives if chaos is mixed with dark humor and Brit punk irreverence. And again, the Brit punk irreverence was sort of lost on me when we were originally looking at Heart, the City Beneath. But it's also kind of represented here. Be very clear, Warhammer Games Workshop is a UK-based company. I agree the 4 Chaos Gods aren't the best, but the designers had to make them their own instead of using the source material. Demote them to serving a true Chaos God, replace them. No, I mean, to me, the 4 Chaos Gods represent sort of some of the most, dangerous, potentially worrisome psychological elements that exist within the human psyche. The one is murder, rage, hate, right? It's all the stuff of Khorne. And it might seem crazy, but it's kind of like getting to kind of a weird nihilistic idea. But like even change, right? When you're thinking about a structure of a society of law versus chaos, right? It's a certain way of saying like liberalism is almost evil in this world, right? Wanting change, wanting to make a difference, wanting something better for yourself, wanting to make, change your stars and change your destiny and change your fate is inherently kind of a weirdly greedy, selfish thing. And so that's kind of where like Tzeentch comes in, and like the Lord, and the idea that, it leads to greed and wanting more, and, all these things, not being satisfied with what your lot in life is. And then obviously Nurgle represents sort of the most, greatest concern for most people: aging, dying, disease, the wearing away of the physical form. It speaks to vanity. It speaks to all those things. And then there's Slaanesh. And of course, vanity and the desire for excess. I mean, it's basically the 7 deadly sins, right? I'm not quite the most thing, but the 7 deadly sins are pride, greed, envy, wrath, envy, lust, gluttony, and sloth. And those are kind of well represented by the 4 chaos gods. 7's too many. Who has time for all that? That being said, that's not the worst thing in the world to use those. But, I mean, it doesn't really matter. And then we got information about the bloody flux. Gotta love the dysentery. Here you go. Dysentery rules. Boom. Hold on a sec. Water. Pressure. I agree, it would be too Christian. No rules for water pressure found in the core rulebook. Well, we gave it a shot. All right. Oh, this is all the stuff we could buy. We didn't really get into equipment and everything like that, but seems like there's a lot of stuff going on here. So that is Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay 4th edition. Oh, how wet is it? That's a great question. We're at the beginning. Let's take a look. We do got to get it wet here. Well, conserve such as getting wet, although it's not saying something is wet. It's saying getting wet. So that's one wet. The wet land, I don't think that counts. Wetlands, I don't think that counts. Wetlands, I don't think that counts. No, it looks like the wet count is 1. So that is Warhammer 4th edition. It's cool. I'm a fan of Warhammer. I love the lore of the world. It is very much a, simulationist narrativist game, a simulationist narrative TTRPG in the vein of Against the Dark Master. It's. I'm trying to think of this. My sense, and I've talked about this before. My sense is that the game isn't necessarily complex, but it is complicated. And what I mean by that is complex games have just a ton of different rules and a million. The rules here actually seem pretty simple and straightforward. Roll the dice and check your result. Almost everything seems to run off of that one thing. I'm sure there's some intricacies to combat, of course. But I say it's complicated because, I'm sorry, I got it reversed. It's not really complicated. The game's pretty easy, but it is complex. There's a lot of choices. There's a lot of different careers. There's a lot of different, things that you could take. So, there's something to be said about games that aren't necessarily super complicated but offer a lot of depth and have a lot of complexity built into them. So, another way to think of it is the game seems like it has a lot of crunchy depth, but it doesn't really seem like it's, so many rules, so many things that it's going to overwhelm you. I don't know. Is it a game I would ever play? Probably. Is it a game I would stick with for the long term? I don't know. I mean, the existence of fate and fortune and resilience, does feel like it could kind of give you that kind of cool, heroic vibe for some people. And maybe you could go a long time. Certainly hundreds of experience required to probably master a thing, a career and change careers and all that other stuff. And you could always change careers and sort of develop your character that way. So it feels like it's kind of a skill-based progression. There's levels for sure, but they're almost more like this is where, when you go up a level, you lose access to some of your under levels. It's almost like jobs from Final Fantasy Tactics. Again, basics are pretty simple, but it is pretty fiddly. Beowulf says injury tables, please. Sorry, Beowulf. All right. We'll do injury tables. We're just going to look at them. We're not really going to go over them, talk about them or anything like that. Options, sudden death. All right, here we go. Critical tables. When you receive a critical wound by losing more than one thing, roll D100. So these are for the head. This is just for the head. Minor cut, poked out eye, sliced ear, broken jaw, concussive blow, mangled ear, decapitated. Arm, we can tear our muscles, gaping wound, rupture our ligaments, cleft our hands, brutal dismemberment. A gut blow, bruised ribs, cracked ribs, a painful cut, torn apart. Huh. If that's not a simulationist, like if that's not like a gory, grimdark simulationist rule, I don't. Torn apart, you are hacked in two. The top half lands in a random direction, and all characters within 2 yards are showered in blood. Leg wounds, we could get shattered pelvis. The blow shatters your pelvis, severing one leg, then driving through to the next. You die instantly from the traumatic shock. There you go. This is wonderful. Yay. I don't know. Some of this feels like it's trying to be a crunchier fantasy Call of Cthulhu. Yep. I actually think that's pretty good. To be clear, it's not quite on the, it's not quite as much on the like brutal, unscrutable secrets that man was not meant to know. Call of Cthulhu is definitely more of a horror game. Warhammer Fantasy is not necessarily a horror game. It is dark fantasy and, grim dark fantasy potentially, if you want to call it that. And so I think that there is a slight difference. But there's also a lot of times where you're just like, you're going into the forest to kill goblins, orcs and goblins. You're, dealing with an infestation of Skaven. You're, rooting out a corruption within a noble court, So, Lan says, tuned in on the pelvis result. I have an original copy of this game. Best TTRPG I never really intended to play. Yeah, that's fair enough. It's not your typical D&D heroic fantasy type game at all, for sure. It's not. And if you have a group that's expecting that and wants that and needs that, don't do it. Don't do it. And I'm not saying you need to know the Warhammer vibe, but if you like the Warhammer vibe and you dig the Warhammer vibe, then it could be a good fit. Everybody's basically losing. There's nobody winning in Warhammer. It's just a question of who loses the least, and that could be a very brutal. There's a great board game, by the way, called Year of the Dragon. I love it, but everybody I used to play with hated it, and the reason why is because the way Year of the Dragon works is it's a 12-round board game, and the first 2 rounds, basically good stuff happens, and then for the rest of the year, the rest 10 months, because it's a Year of the Dragon, there's a random disaster. Once the game starts, they're randomized, but what order the disasters are going to come out in. And basically, the point of the game is who can mitigate the disasters the best. So everybody kind of ends up worse off than they did, but it's who could plan the best. And, I know that there's going to be, I know there's going to be a famine in round 6. So I'm going to store food now so that when the famine hits, I can subtract all my food and not lose any points. Right. And then, so on and so forth down the line. And a lot of people, at that time were getting used to Euro games like, Settlers of Catan, where it's like, hey, we all start with 2 victory points because we all start with 2 settlements. That's the way the game starts. And then at the end of the game, it's when someone gets to 10. And hey, Ben got to 10 points. He's the winner. But I did pretty good. I got longest road. I got a couple cities. I got 8 points. So when I look back at the beginning of the game, I only had 2 points. Now I have 8 points. I lost. But, I still feel like I have 4 times as many points as I had when I started the game. That was very popular with people because they were like, oh, this is fun. This is nice. Even when I'm losing, I'm winning. And there's a reason why Euro games became really, really popular. Year of the Dragon, which was kind of in part of that early Euro game period, not as popular. And people and I played with plenty of my people in my group who did not like playing it because it felt like you were losing. And I'm not saying that this game necessarily feels like you're losing, but getting worn down, watching your fate, drain away, watching your resilience drain away, watching your corruption grow, it's kind of part and parcel for the theme, loss isn't bad if the numbers go burr. Sure, I lost, but my numbers are more burr than they were at the beginning of the game. There's a degree of nihilism too. Like I said, you can't win. There's no victory against chaos. There is no total victory against chaos. The humans and the dwarves will never be able to wipe out the orcs and goblins. There will always be more orcs and goblins. They will always be attacking. You will never get rid of them, right? They are, if anything, they're just going to keep growing and growing and growing and growing. And chaos can never be stopped. Even newsflash, like thousands of years ago, when Kalidor Dragon Tamer, caused the Great Vortex and bound chaos to and drained the magic from the world, right? Like that was about the best victory that the world ever had against chaos. And by the way, you live in a world where that is still happening. So like as bad as it is now, it was actually worse. It's just the best they could do is mitigate it. So anyways, and like 100 high elf archmages had to sacrifice their souls to do this. I did almost get Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay a couple of times, but every time it was considered, we all said, we have all the material to play Warhammer 40K. Let's just do that. Yeah, it's fair enough. I'm wrapping up. It was cool. The game was cool, and we had some nice tips and nice super chats, and it was good times. So, I don't know. Interesting. First look. I mean, again, we're seeing some patterns here. We've seen Mithras. We've seen Call of Cthulhu. We've seen Against the Dark Master. It's, it's very similar. Yes, it gets much worse leading into Age of Sigmar, because then you have the end time. But that's also kind of Mebaman why I didn't like the end times and why I thought the whole Archeron thing and blah, blah, blah. Did we discuss if you can get the book in PDF from somewhere as a bundle? I don't know. The PDF is quite expensive. It's $30. And it looks like if you go to Cubicle 7's website, it is sold out. Am I reading this right? Yes. Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay Core Rulebook is out of stock. On the Cubicle 7 page, the physical book. I don't necessarily know that means that you can't. Oh, but GM Scott, it does say on the Cubicle 7 page, it says all orders of this product include a PDF redeemable via drive-through RPG. So there you go. But it's out of stock. So I don't know what buying it really does for you. Maybe there's a way you could buy it somewhere else and show Cubicle 7 and email them, and maybe they'd give you the PDF. I don't know. Yeah, very cool. Yeah. Prices on Amazon are nuts. Well, yeah, I mean, if it's out of print, it's out of print. But I will say that I thought people are saying that it has appeared as bundles in the Humble bundles on occasion. Humble did 2 bundles in the past year, so maybe that's another way you could look for it. Wait for a bundle to show up. But yeah, End Times was terrible. End Times bundled the whole deal. The whole thing with Archeon, the Ever Chosen, and Chaos winning, and even the end of his storyline I thought was really disappointing. Yeah, End Times was totally. It was for me. End Times was like the Warhammer equivalent of the Spell Plague. It was just terrible. You can buy Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay for $20 US PDF only on Drive-Thru RPG. And if you do, we have a link to description below in our description. And then we get a couple percent. It doesn't cost you anything extra, but it gives us a couple bucks that I use to basically buy these PDFs for these kind of these kind of shows. So, well, thanks everybody. We appreciate you guys coming out and hanging out. Super chat from Bendril. Thank you so much for that. Big tip from Ben for more first looks and to guarantee a Chubo's lock. And super chat from Dr. Waits, who wanted to pop in and support and shout out the community, not just the stream. So, yeah, fun little stream, fun little game. Apparently, there's a lot of books that have been released for it. So, if you're interested in getting into a system, it's been out for 5 or 6 years. Who knows? Is there a 5th edition coming? Probably not. But yeah, there's there's an entire campaign, Enemy in Shadows, Death on the Reich, Horned Rat Companion, Power Behind the Throne, lots of stuff. Are most of these adventures or are these splat books? I can't really tell. So what's Thursday bringing? FR? I don't know. The patrons will vote and we'll find out. As we always do. Way too many books. The Enemy Within campaign is good. Oh, interesting. Are there like splat books? Or no, not really. Interesting. It won't let me it's only letting me look at stuff that's on sale. On the Cubicle 7 website, it is only letting me look at items that are on sale for some odd reason. Not really sure why, but that is what is happening. Nope, I definitely did not. Why? Anyways, there we go. For some odd reason, it was like locked into that. Yeah, so there's a bunch of adventures. There's a campaign called The Enemy Within. I don't actually know. Somebody, Middenheim, City of the Wolf, Altdorf, Crown of the Empire. So it looks like it's all based around Reichland. Lands. Oh, that's for 2nd edition core, right? Well, we were reviewing 4th edition land. Apparently, that's $30, but 2nd edition apparently is $20. That's all right. That's all right. That's all right. That's okay. Yeah. So make sure you get 4th edition. I think the link, it should be $30 on DriveThruRPG, but yeah. Yeah, there are splat books, but they're kind of hidden. All right, fair enough. Well, anyways, apparently there's a lot of books out there. But yeah. I should probably wait for 5th edition anyways. Then I'd have 1st edition, 3rd edition, and then 5th edition. Just every other edition. Yeah, I don't know. This is probably one of those games where I'm like, in some weird world, I would want to run this just because it's easy for me to run because I have like infinite lore about, the Warhammer world, and it's just super easy for me to just come up with plots and come up with, responses and come up with fronts and, come up with interesting ideas and really, express the coolness of the world. So there's like, it's the same reason like I want to play Dune is because I just have such a knowledge of that world and that universe. The mechanics, I think there's something there that's interesting. There's a little bit of fun there to watch your character, and there's a little bit of narrativism there, which I think actually helps me, feel that a lot. So I don't know. Overall, I would say, it's, not my favorite game that we've ever looked at here, but it's got some promise, and I was surprised by how narrative it was. In some ways, it feels almost maybe more narrative than Against the Dark Master. I could be wrong there, but with the fate and the fortune and the resilience and the resolve, with the ability to spend to get rid of corruption by doing, taking devil's bargains, getting a reroll for gaining corruption. Like there's a lot of ways for you to control the outcome of effects in the game, representing it through your character's fate, your character's resolve, and your character's willingness to make dark deals, you know? So I think it's pretty interesting. Again, I don't do reviews. I've never played the game, but it seems cool. It seems pretty cool. So that's going to do it for us. That's going to do it for me. Thanks for hanging out with me. Thanks for taking a look at this game. Again, if you're interested in checking out any of the stuff I talked at the beginning of this the stream, remember, we're running our new Pathfinder 2nd Edition Southern Beaches mega campaign. 20-ish games going on a week within a large but small community, which is actually a nice thing. There's enough people there that you'll never get to really meet everybody, but it's not so many people that you feel overwhelmed. We only have a couple hundred people on our Discord. And maybe 100 people are very active at any one time. The game has about 40 or 50 players, but the key is the game has about 20 or 25 GMs. So there's literally a 2-to-1 ratio between players and GMs. So if you're interested in playing kind of a cool way to play Pathfinder 2nd Edition, maybe come check out our Patreon, patreon.com/nicelesscall, link in the description below. At our $10 a month champion level, we'll get you to know the reaches. Additionally, Magpie Games started their Root, Ruins, and Expeditions Kickstarter today, which we endorsed with a nice little testimonial. And if you're interested in that Root game, that might now be a good time to check it out. And again, thanks to all the patrons who support these streams and these channels, not just with your tips, but with your YouTube memberships, joining the adventure, and of course with your monthly Patreon subscriptions. It is very appreciated. So that's going to do it for me. And on behalf of Bob and Smith, who hopefully will someday be back on this channel, that's going to do it for us. And we'll see you next time on Knights of Last Call.